Committee on Agriculture and Livestock come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Dean,
Here.
Vice Chair Guerra, Representative Kane, Representative Hopper. Here. Representative Kitzman. Here. Representative Lopez. Here. Representative McLaughlin. Here. Representative Money. Representative Munoz.
Quorum is present. As a reminder, anyone present that is testifying before the committee, please register at the kiosks located in the hallways behind the hearing rooms. If you require assistance in registering or testifying, please contact the committee staff. Before we begin today's hearing, I'd like to briefly go over the procedure we'll be following. We will hear testimony by calling the entire panel at once. I'll verify each witness one at a time, starting with the first. After verification, we will hear that witness's testimony. We'll then proceed to verify and hear from the next witness and continue in that order until all testimony has been presented. Once all witnesses have testified, we'll open the floor to questions from the members for the entire panel. Any questions, members? All right. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the important work this committee has done to stay ahead of the growing threat of New World screwworm. I feel like this committee has made real progress. I especially want to thank Chairman Kitzman for his leadership on the issue, and all of you, each one of the members of this committee, for taking the time to learn about this issue, raise awareness, and help identify solutions. I also want to thank U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins and Governor Greg Abbott for their help for the $750 million investment to build a new sterile fly facility in South Texas. This will mark a major step toward pushing the screwworm back to the Darien Gap where it belongs. I also want to thank U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the FDA for authorizing the emergency use of animal drugs through the FDA to help combat screwworm infestations this morning. That gives us another critical tool in our response efforts. To our invited witnesses, thank you for being here and for your work leading up to today's hearing. As we move forward, I ask that you keep your focus on current screwworm research and how Texas can lead in surveillance, prevention, and rapid response for livestock and wildlife. With that, members, let's get started with our first panel. Chair calls Sid Miller, Dr. Louis Bud Dinges, Janine Coggeshall, and Dr. Philip Kaufman. Thank you all for being here today. We show you registered as Sid Miller, Commissioner, Texas Department of Agriculture, testifying neutrally. Is that correct?
As always, you're correct, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good day. It's good to be back in front of the committee. I'm actually honored to be here. I know how important this committee is. I chaired it several sessions myself. So thank you for the job you're doing in attention to this matter. It threatens a $30 billion livestock industry here in our state. So it is very serious. I want to try to bring new information, not regurgitate a lot of the old information, but people often ask me, well, how did we get the screwworm up here? What happened? So in researching it, it looks like we had a surgence of cartel activity from Central America smuggling stolen cattle into Mexico. And some of the reports will say over the last 3 to 4 years, since cattle prices have gotten so high, the numbers could be up to around 800,000 that crossed in without being inspected. So we're pretty much sure that that's where it's come from. We don't talk about this a lot, but humans are susceptible to it. It's approaching almost 40 cases in Mexico. Last week we had our first human death in Mexico. An 86-year-old woman died from a screwworm infection. So how would a person get infected? Just like a cow or a sheep or anything else. It could be an open wound. It could be nasal discharge during the night while you're sleeping, or watery eyes, any of that. That's the most common way. So that was very unfortunate. We did have some very good news this week. We made a lot of progress since we last met. Brooke Rollins came to Texas and a joint press conference with the governor, announcing that they had secured the money and was going to spend $750 million on a fly production facility at Moore Air Force Base near Edinburgh. So that's good. We needed that. I think we all definitely support that. But also what was intriguing to me was another $100 million, we're not talking about that much, for research and innovation. I'd visit with her after the meeting. Part of that is to go to the bait that I've been pushing so hard for that will kill 90% of the screwworm flies. She had a little pushback from staff, which is not unusual. One of the questions was, well, you know, the bait also kills the good flies. And I looked at her and I said, good flies? I never saw a good fly. And it's not going to kill any good flies in Texas. We're going to kill good flies in Mexico because we're not going to use it up here. She said, oh, well, I hadn't thought of that. I guess you're right. And then the other thing she said, well, my staff is concerned that this bait will kill the sterile flies. I go, of course it'll kill the sterile flies. You don't put the bait out and the sterile flies at the same time. You've got to put the bait out, let it work, and then when it dissipates, you follow up about 4 weeks later, Mr. Chairman, and then you drop the sterile flies to mop up the remaining 10%. So that seemed to satisfy her, so hopefully we'll make some headway on the bait. There's been pushback on the insecticide that's used in the bait, dichloroball. Some say that that's not, it's still labeled for, has been in use since 1950. So, but we don't really have to worry if EPA labels it or not, because they're not in charge. We're not going to use it in the United States. We're going to use it in Mexico. So we've got to work that out with the Mexican government. There's other chemicals that are approved. If you know, somehow we get it up here and have to get EPA approval. Besides dichlorobos, Coumaphos is approved. It's not as effective, but Dr. Dingus uses that all the time in his fever tick program, so it's been around a while, and we already know how to use and handle that. So if anybody gets hung up on the insecticide, it's not a deal killer. There's others that we can use. So we've got the bait. Looks like it's working towards that end. We have another company that's real close to coming out. I call it inoculant. They call it a vaccine. I don't think it's a vaccine because it doesn't create antibodies. What this does is creates a special protein in the animal, so when they lay the eggs either never hatch or they hatch and immediately die. So this is very inexpensive. It's about $1 a dose. You know, high-priced cattle prices, that's nothing. So we could do that even in sheep and horses and other animals. They've been pretty successful. They're having to create this for the screwworm fly, but they have been successful in doing the very same thing against certain varieties of ticks, and it's shown that it works well there. And then, as the chairman just indicated, we got news this morning that the FDA was going to release any veterinary medicine that could be used to treat, would now be in emergency use, be okayed to use against the New World screwworm. So that would include Dectomax and ivermectin and everything else that we'd like to use as a feed additive. I think there'll be more information coming forth on that with specifics. The release, Mr. Chairman, as you saw, wasn't real specific, but I think that's coming. But they wanted to get that out, and that was directly the result of this committee, myself, many others sending letters, the Cattlemen's Association, both the independent and the Southwestern Cattle Raisers, the Farm Bureau, and others sending in requests for that to happen. And we give Brooke Rollins a lot of credit for that too, because she was really helping us with that. So that's it. We've got we have developed Swarm Lure 5 is what's out there now for the bait traps. We have a proprietary bait that's different. It's called TDA Swarm Lure. It's an attractant. The difference in ours and the one that's currently on the market, ours has a polymer in it that makes it time released. It'll last about 4 weeks, so it's an even release. The other one, Swarm Lure 5, is good, but it's a whole lot, and then it just tapers off, so it's not uniform. And the reason ours is important is that's the one we want to use for the bait. We want a constant, steady release in that bait so we can get as much out of that bait life as possible. So we're excited about that. So that's kind of where we are on that. Far as biosecurity, I've told y'all, you know, we run biosecurity for the state and pull over trucks and inspect them. We set up around the state and have mobile inspection stations. Right now, Representative Lopez, we're in South Texas inspecting cotton equipment that's leaving and headed to the high plains, into the rolling plains to harvest cotton. We pull those over. They have to be very specifically cleaned so they don't transport things like a boll weevil or other cotton pests and diseases up into other areas of our state. So that's one example. We look for a spotted lanternfly. We're on top of that one. Longhorn tick is a new one that we've really got to be on the lookout for. Mediterranean fruit fly, gypsy moth, which is very detrimental to our horticulture industry and our forestry industry. We have two types of canker, mostly affect citrus. We've been able to keep the very, very worst one out of the Rio Grande Valley. We've got it quarantined around Fort Bend in Harris County. We destroy trees down there every day. Matter of fact, we're destroying some trees in the valley today. There's an insect called the emerald ash borer that is wiped out ash trees all across the United States. It's just now got to the edge of Texas. It's in East Texas, so we screen for that and watch for that. All types of invasive plants, all types of invasive diseases. We had a scare on the Asian giant hornet. I don't know if you remember that one in the news, but we collect mystery seeds from China, and our biosecurity team goes through that. We've got a new cottonseed bug that we're on the lookout for that could destroy our cotton industry. We recently had two outbreaks, one in Level Land and one in El Paso of a red flower beetle that just took over the whole community, infested houses and closets and babies' beds and everything. It was another thing kind of like out of a horror movie. We got that in. Of course, we look for, you know, the pecan industry, pecan weevils, all kinds of molds, bollworms, again, another cotton pest, wood borers that can destroy our forestry industry. We found some in pallets. All pallets have to be heat treated to keep from bringing in insects. So, and we've recently had the hammerhead worm, and there's a whole host of stuff like that. Just kind of give you an idea. We don't just work on the screwworm. We've got a whole host of things that we protect the state of Texas from. So I have some asks today. I was told if we needed anything to let y'all know. So here's my want list. I have a good bit of funds, around $1 million left in my biosecurity account. We lose that at the end of the month. They sweep it because we're not able to roll it forward. We need to roll that forward to fight the screwworm. We've got a request into the LBB. They have to approve it. A letter from this committee would go a long way into making that happen. And what we need that for is we need to roll that forward to buy more traps, number one. We've got some traps ordered, but we don't have enough. And we're going to run out of money before we get into the new year. If that money's swept. We don't have any test kits. Farmers, if they suspect a screwworm, they don't have the little test tube or a place to send it. We need to get those and get those in the hands of the farmers and ranchers. So if they do find a suspect case, they can collect those and send them in for testing. One other thing that we need is peace officer status. We spend a lot of money hiring the DPS to go with us on these road stations and these stops. We do not have the authority to, find someone or arrest them or chase them down if they run the truck station. So we hire and spend money, and the DPS doesn't really like to do it because it's just babysitting, basically, us, just standing out there with us all day with their hands on their hips and watching trucks drive by. So we could save the state a lot of money if we had, not everybody, but just the biosecurity inspectors could have peace officer status. We spend upwards of $500,000 reimbursing DPS for their time, and that would save us a lot of money. So we need the test kits, we need the bait, we need peace officer status. And one thing you might consider is maybe not during the special session, but maybe in the next session or when the opportunity arises, is maybe a grant program for these farmers and ranchers to help them battle the screwworm, to maybe reimburse them for ivermectin or putting out the bait or, you know, sending in test kits, anything that would encourage them to participate in the annihilation of the screwworm. Just a thought, but that's what we need. We need our funds roll forward more than we need anything. If we had that, we could buy more fly traps, we could buy some bait, we could buy some test kits and get those out there. I'll take any questions.
All right, we'll go to questions at the end. Thank
right.
you. Chair calls Dr. Lewis Bud Dinges, Executive Director, Texas Animal Health Commission, testifying neutrally. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee members. I'm going to open up today and give you a recap of the current situation there in Mexico as far as the New World screwworms are concerned. As of August the 9th, Seneca, which is the USDA equivalent of here in the United States and Mexico, reports that there are 4,684 accumulated cases of New World screwworms. That's a case growth rate of 5.8%. This rate has decreased from 12% over 5 weeks ago. There have been no further northern spread reported from the case in July the 7th there in Veracruz, Mexico. That case is reported to be 370 miles south of our southern border, and that case is resolved as of July the 19th. As of August the 5th, there are 35 human cases reported in Mexico, and it has been reported that Seneca has placed approximately 700 New World screwworm-specific traps and lures, mostly in the high-risk areas such as feedlots, livestock holding areas, and slaughterhouses there in Mexico. The remaining traps that they have distributed are located in southern Mexico, just north of the current sterile fly dispersal area. To kind of recap what USDA has done over the last 2.5 or 3 months, on May the 28th, the USDA committed to providing $21 million in support to the conversion of a sterile fruit fly production facility in Matapa, Mexico, into a sterile New World screwworm fly production facility. Mexico is supposed to contribute $39 million to that effort. It is estimated to be completed in July of 2026, and that production facility should produce 60 to 100 million sterile flies a week. Back on June 18th, Secretary Rollins announced the launch of the sterile New World fly dispersal facility there in Edinburgh. That facility will house the Copeg production. If we do get infestation here in the United States, they will bring the 100 million flies up to that dispersal facility, and we will have those at our disposal to help if we do get an infestation here in Texas and the United States. At that time, she also announced a robust plan, a 5-prong plan to address the New World screwworm situation in Mexico. As of July the 9th, the southern border was closed once again after a short-lived phased reopening, which started on July the 7th. So the border remains closed to the import of cattle, bison, and equine at this time. On July the 23rd, Secretary Rollins asked that New World screwworm fly surveillance be conducted at the Texas southern border. Currently, there are 101 New World screwworm-specific traps placed by both the USDA and the Texas Animal Health Commission between Del Rio and Brownsville. And then the announcement that she made last Friday, August the 15th, the $750 million investment towards a sterile New World screwworm fly production facility at Edinburgh, and also announced the immediate actions to build upon the existing 5-prong program, which discussed the innovating our way to eradication. The USDA will support scaling and implementing proven concepts, as well as a number of long-term research projects focused on the new New World screwworm sterile fly production techniques, novel New World screwworm traps and lures, New World screwworm therapies that could be stockpiled and used during a New World screwworm outbreak in the United States, and any other tools that would bolster the preparedness or response to New World screwworms. She also talked about protecting the United States border in the $750 million appropriated for the New World screwworm sterile fly production facility. That production facility will produce upwards of 300 million sterile flies per week. She also included wildlife migration prevention. She wants to increase the tick riders at the southern border, as well as train canines to detect New World screwworms that can be utilized by the Customs and Border Protection, as well as the Border Patrol. Another point was to stop the pest from spreading in Mexico and ensure we are full partners in eradication. The federal officials comment to continue working with Mexico to contain the pest south of the U.S. border by enhancing U.S. oversight, surveillance, improving case reporting, locking down animal movements to prevent further spread, provide traps, lures, and training, and verify the Mexican New World screwworm activities. So the United States Department of Agriculture is currently working on their New World screwworm response playbook. We are working with them as part of a working group with the National Association of State Animal Health Officials on that playbook. Keep in mind that Texas Animal Health Commission does have a plan, so if we do have a New World screwworm infestation tomorrow, we will put that plan into action and respond accordingly. The APHIS Veterinary Services, their response preparedness have included, they're managing the response effort now, or with an incident management team that has been in place since March of this year. They've developed 2 strike teams, one for the Southwest United States, which trained back in April of this year. We were fortunate to have 4 people or staff members attend that training. The Southeast United States strike team has undergoing training this week in Florida. So the ARS, the Agricultural Research Service, has played an important part in this effort. They do have staff members monitoring the current fly strain, and they're at the Copeg facility in Panama. They've also assisted us in planning with subject matter expertise in the form of entomologists that have helped with our field trainings as we train our staff to prepare for response efforts. They also have worked with our epidemiology staff to explore alternating treatment strategies. As far as the Animal Health Commission activities go, we've been keeping an eye on the New World screwworm issue since March of 2024. Since early 2024, our planning and preparation activities related to New World screwworms have been the primary focus of our emergency management groups. Since May 2025, we have been conducting New World screwworm field response trainings for our Texas Animal Health Commission inspectors and field staff. We've also included other response agencies with that and response partners. To date, we've trained 76 of our 110 inspectors, plus 8 management region directors and field veterinarians. We've also trained 12 parks and wildlife biologists and game wardens, and we've also included 3 of the Texas Southwest Cattle Raiser Special Rangers in this training as well. Since November 2024, we've been developing and distributing outreach materials and done several state and national educational presentations on New World screwworms. We've been holding biweekly communication coordination calls with state agency response partners and industry partners. We have, since December of 2024, we have weekly collaboration calls with response partners to work on a response plan development. And we have internal and external working groups developing response plans to incorporate the 3 components of a response effort, which include treatment, surveillance, and animal control methods. We've been working twice a week with the National Association of State Animal Health Officials Working Group and the USDA National preparedness and incident coordination staff to develop the New World Screwworm response playbook. We've also been working with that working group to develop interstate movement plans as well. We've also worked with USDA, FDA, and EPA to expand treatment options. And as we have heard today, that Health and Human Services issued the declaration to allow FDA emergency use of animal drugs to combat New World screwworms. We also are carrying out Governor Abbott's announcement of the New World Screwworm response team to amplify New World Screwworm preparedness here in Texas. We have weekly meetings between multiple levels of staff with the Texas Department of Wildlife to coordinate plan development and enhancement. We also have weekly meetings to coordinate communication of existing and future outreach and initiatives and activities. The first meeting of this response team will be September 4th. Thank you. That includes my testimony, and I'll answer any questions.
All right. We'll go to questions at the end. And by the way, we want to welcome Chair Angela Orr, who's joining us today. Thank you for being here. Chair calls Janine Coggeshall. We have you registered as General Counsel representing the Texas Animal Health Commission. I think we need to, health is misspelled. I'm gonna fix that if
That'll
that's
be my
okay
fault
with
then.
you. And you're testifying neutrally. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Please continue.
So I can speak a little bit to the current needs of the Animal Health Commission. We actually feel very stable where we are in our preparation for response for New World Screwworm, and we don't see any unmet needs of the agency. But I would like to echo Commissioner Miller's plea for finding additional resources for members of the public that might eventually be affected by this. Right now, in emergency response or emergency declarations, animal disease is not specifically enumerated, but that could be something that the legislature might adapt or just ensure that if there was a state of emergency declared, that there would be available resources for those producers who find themselves impacted by this disease.
Okay. Chair calls Philip Kaufman. We have you registered as testifying. You're the professor and department head on behalf of AgriLife Research, neutral on the bill. Is that correct? Neutral?
That is correct. Thank
Yeah,
you.
please continue.
So today I wanted to visit with the committee about the opportunity that Secretary Rollins has provided with the exceptional support for a production facility in South Texas and the need for us to leverage that opportunity with the capacity for conducting research which will hopefully prevent this pest from returning. So essentially in the last 50 years, very little research has been able to be done with this fly because it's considered a foreign animal disease pest. And by that standing, it's not possible to have that pest in the U.S. And because of that, ARS has been largely restricted to conducting research in Panama or in South America where the pest is endemic. And that greatly limits our capacity to leverage many of our modern scientific advances, such as genetics, to identify new ways to manage this pest, which leaves us with, although very, very strong approach, the SIT, the sterile insect technique, remains our primary method of eradicating this pest. And it will work, and with the increase in production, it will give us the capacity to return the pest to the Darien Gap. And hopefully our advances in the next few years will allow us to consider eradicating the pest from all of South America and eliminating this from returning to Texas in the future. And so I just wanted to provide some insight as to technologies that didn't exist 50 years ago when our scientists were able to work on this pest. And it can include things such as developing remote sensing technologies that can identify an infestation on an animal without actually having to physically inspect the animal. And you can think of it as the similar type of an approach where we have explosives can be detected by sensors in the area. Similar technologies are certainly capable of being developed for screwworm infestations. And so as animals are, say, moving through cattle chutes, being prepared for importation, it would be wonderful if we could identify an infestation and send that animal for further inspection while reducing the human capital component of such an infection detection. As Commissioner Miller has talked about the development of new attractants, those are best done when you can actually evaluate those products against the screwworm. As I understand it, TDA is working with the folks down in Panama to evaluate the new technologies that they're developing. And it would be very nice if we were able to look at those, at least preliminarily, here in Texas. And that can be done if a research space is identified and made available as well as supported. On the genetic side, the screwworm's genome has been sequenced. So we know all of the DNA strands that make a screwworm. And by knowing what those are, our scientists can select certain regions and target those regions for development of new pest tools, such as it might be possible to build a screwworm that can't detect a wound on an animal, and therefore it becomes no different than, say, another pest. And if we can engineer that into a screwworm and then use a technique called gene drive, where you essentially release these flies into the environment, let them breed with that wild population, you can essentially create a screwworm that is not attracted to a wounded animal and thereby make it no longer a parasite. And that in the perfect world would eliminate that pest. And if we did that, then it might be possible to continue such an eradication program throughout South America, which has been to date kind of financially impractical given the width of South America and where that fly exists. So these sorts of technologies are available to our scientists. What we lack is the ability to work with the fly itself without going to, say, Panama or one of our South American countries where we would have to collaborate with scientists down there, which may not have access to the technologies that we have here in Texas, as well as partnerships with the USDA, with all of our Texas universities. AgriLife is in many of the universities in Texas, and we have some phenomenal scientists that it would be just delightful to leverage their minds to try and tackle this problem and place us at the forefront. And all of these technologies would then be applicable to many of the other pests that Commissioner Miller has mentioned. And but having those sorts of facilities available with the funding support for those would be advantageous. And this new facility in South Texas would give us the opportunity to have the fly in Texas and allow such activities to occur. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right. You saw what Chair Kitzman and I filed recently in order to create this institute department. Tell me, I guess number one, what keeps A&M and A&M AgriLife from doing that now?
I guess I'm not probably qualified to be the person to address that specifically as to what may keep us from doing something. I can say on the biology side, it's having access to that fly keeps our scientists from actually working specifically on that pest. And one of the other challenges is that in our federal funding portfolio, things like screwworm are often not included because they're not a pest in the United States. And so having funding that's directed toward activities that aren't funded by the federal government through the competitive grants process is always welcome and allows us to have much greater freedom in what we're able to work on, which might normally not be justified as a funding priority by grants review panels.
So access to the fly and funding. Obviously, with the building of this new facility, there'll somewhat be some access to the fly. Does USDA have to allow A&M to go in there and, or does the state of Texas have to allow A&M to go in there? Or how would that work? Now that the facility will be being built, what needs to happen for A&M AgriLife to go into that facility and use those flies towards this research?
So we would have to have a relationship with USDA APHIS, who would essentially control access to the flies. The facility would have to meet their standards for containment, which are likely to be arthropod containment level 3, which is a shower in, shower out type facility that prevents the escape of the fly. Having the fly being produced in South Texas is probably the largest hurdle that would need to be overcome, because if it's already in the area, access to it is going to be considerably easier. As my understanding is that there would have to be arrangements made with APHIS to allow our scientists to have access to non-sterilized flies. And what that might look like, I'm sure, is a point of negotiation should such a facility be available. I do know that in the Panama facility currently, the risk is so great with anything done in the research spectrum leaking into the production that they operate on a, think of it more of as a do no harm. We don't want to do anything in the research space that could adversely affect production because it's our single and only production facility. Therefore, if they wanted to work on insecticides, they have to have special measures in place to make sure that none of those insecticides made it into the production plant and crashed the production of the sterile flies. And having multiple research or multiple production sites that it appears we may have in the near future would allow for something like production of the male-only strain. So one of the things that is a potential possibility is if the Mexico plant comes online, they may be able to rear that male-only strain in Mexico because its production there would not impact production at the Pecora, Panama plant. And so having facilities in Texas where we could perhaps do scale-up production to demonstrate that the new fly strains that might be developed from research could in fact be scaled up. So you go from small laboratory colonies of maybe a couple of thousand flies producing your weekly output to having millions of flies producing that, and knowing that this new fly strain that's been developed that has some new capability, right? It can't smell a host, whatnot, whatever might be bred into them. If you're able to demonstrate that fly can be reared in mass numbers, in all likelihood, the production side is going to be more willing to take the chance and incorporate that new fly strain into their production process than they would having a scientist saying, I have the next best fly, you guys shut down your current production and start raising my new fly. That's currently a great risk in that process. And that's an opportunity that something like this would afford.
Let's talk about the cost. So I'm guessing you're not going to be able to tell me how much it would cost to build a facility, but you can tell me how much it would cost to run it, maybe.
Well, the costs are likely to be driven by the size and the breadth of what is being offered. And I really am not able to give you a number. It's something that I think if requested, we would be able to work on and provide the committee with that as if that is deemed something you'd ask of us. We have experience in running similar type facilities, and I think it's a number we could come up with for the committee.
So the federal government's gonna be building the $750 million project that has this facility on it, and so do you envision this research would be done in that facility, or would it be done somewhere near that facility, or how would that work?
I would hope that the research facility, if one is provided, would be placed near, but not necessarily connected to the production plant to avoid challenges that I think they currently have at the Panama plant. But not having visited the Panama plant, I don't know the full details of why they're reluctant to allow certain types of research at that facility. Again, details are short right now, is from my understanding of what USDA is planning in the lower Rio Grande Valley. But it would be wonderful if a research space was provided that allowed us to do the type of research that needs to be done on the fly to keep us from being in this position in another 30 or 40 years.
And so typically in a situation like this, could you have are you saying that within that project, they might also include a research facility within the project, within the footprint of the project? Or does that never happen, and we would need to work on that on our own?
I would hope that they would consider research space as they're putting together a facility like this, but quite honestly, I don't know how those conversations would move forward. It's certainly an opportunity, and again, not knowing the end cost of what a 300 million production facility would cost them on how they choose to build it, I can't answer that question.
Mm-hmm. But I guess in other scenarios with other things that are that universities do research in that are connected to a facility that the federal government has built, does that relationship, have you ever seen that relationship where the federal government provides most of the facility to research, or do you typically see the university have to, pony up the resources to provide that facility and make sure that it happens?
I'm not aware of another federal pest production facility that's been built that would be done in the way that I'm suggesting it could be done. I do know that the federal government has a history of working with universities on creating spaces for innovation such as this, and it would be my hope that that would be an approach taken here. But again, it's an opportunity that I think needs to be made aware to those who are designing and considering what this might end up being.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about, you mentioned that already some kind of research and on using these certain kinds of flies that produce males, I think, or something like that. But it seems like we're not using that technology yet.
Right.
Was that right?
That's correct.
And tell us what's lacking.
So as I understand it, there are the fly exists. They have strains of the fly that they currently rear. And they've been able to genetically modify them, as I understand it, that when they have the fly diet, the material that the flies eat as it matures, which is it's essentially dried blood powder mixed with a number of other chemicals and substrates. They're not raised on living animals by any means. It's all non-living sources, and that they have the ability to normally in some of these media, we call it fly rearing media, you add antibiotics to those so that it keeps some of the bacteria that you don't want growing from taking over the media. And so tetracycline is one of those that they've added in the past, and they have a fly strain that if tetracycline is not included in the fly diet, that all of the flies that are destined to become females die. And so they call it the male-only strain. It really does have females, but if they withhold tetracycline, then the females that are, the eggs that are laid that are destined to become female don't survive, and therefore they can double the number of eggs that they'll add to a volume of media, knowing that the total amount of food is available to those that are going to survive, because the male and the females eat the same amount of diet. And so they can essentially double the production of the sterile males from a given volume of media, and they call that the male-only strain. And that strain exists. It was developed by a researcher at North Carolina State University who he had a postdoc who spent months down in Panama creating this fly strain. The second half of using it is that it's a genetically modified organism, and you have to have special permits to release those organisms. And right now that process has not happened as far as I'm aware. And so if they were going to produce those flies and want to release them in Mexico, they would have to have the cooperation of the Mexican government to allow the release of the sterile, genetically modified male flies into the release program. And if it were to occur here, they would have to have similar approvals from the various agencies that would govern that. And that essentially would double your production in a plant instead of the 300 million. Because remember, when you release sterile flies, half of those are females. They're all sterilized, but you're only the 50 million of the 100 million they release per week are male flies. If you produce a male-only strain, you are releasing 100 million flies. So it's as if you're releasing 200 million in the traditional sense.
Yep. Representative McLaughlin.
I got a bunch, so, one of the things I have, you're talking about a research facility. Well, we've been researching in Kerrville, Texas, the Kipling Bushland facility, as you told us in Uvalde, for 50 years. So, I mean, we've been doing that, and they have a facility in Kerrville, Edinburgh, and Panama. And, it's in 50 years, we're not very much farther along of figuring out how to eradicate this fly. I mean, so we're gonna build another research facility when we already have one that we're not getting any results from now. That to me is troubling, for that. And from what I understand, the person you have in Kerrville is one of the most renowned spokesmen on screwworm there is in the country, maybe the world. But, so I mean, that's one concern I have.
Is that AgriLife?
It's USDA, but AgriLife and them work with them. They work jointly together. And so, I mean, that facility's been there. And they talked about bringing flies in, keeping them frozen and so forth, where they do it. I mean, I'm just going off what they said in the Uvalde meeting that I was at. Mm-hmm. The other thing that you brought it up, Commissioner Miller, you brought up the cartel bringing in cattle out of the southern border of Mexico. I'm being told by most of the people that I talk to, and ranchers and feed producers, that the cartel owns between anywhere from 70 to maybe 90% of the cattle business in Mexico now, because it's very lucrative for them and a good way for them to launder their money. That makes me wonder if we're getting skewed numbers from the Mexican government we have because of the cartel's involvement. Secondly, you mentioned that the last case you had was 375 miles in, down in Mexico. Same people, farmers, ranchers, feedlot people that I talked to in that, tell me that there's been cases as close as 175 miles from the Texas border. So that concerns me. And then when we have, and all of you admitted here today, we've got 39 human cases and 1 death. Humans travel a hell of a lot faster and can travel a lot more than what flies can. So, I mean, and to me, it's very frustrating, and I'm not criticizing y'all because I know you're trying now, but here we are. Instead of being proactive, now we're in a reactive state when we could have been in a proactive state, because in 2017, we got a wake-up call when this came into deer in Florida. 2022, we found a Honduran in the United States that was contaminated with this fly. We police the world all over the country, all over the world, and do stuff all over the world. Why we would ever stop producing these flies when they know the threat that it is? Because not only the livestock, the cattle industry and the sheep and the goats, but the wildlife is maybe 3-4 times what the cattle is now in our state. And so this thing could be astronomical when we hit it. And nobody's talking, but when we talk to y'all and ask questions, 80 to 90% mortality rate in your wildlife, that's scary. But I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the cartel side of it.
So let's go one by one. I think there was a few questions there. Let's start with that research done by USDA. Dr. Kaufman, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with the Kerrville lab and their scientists, and those are the scientists that rotate through Panama and spend a 3-year rotation down there. And that laboratory has requested and been denied access to the screwworm to bring live specimens up to Kerrville. They're about to open a beautiful new facility, and even that facility is not built to the standards of holding that fly without it being killed specimens. And you are correct, we can do research on killed specimens. Getting access to those is critically important. But to do things that require the live insect is where that big barrier is. And the screwworm group have been a very productive group, but they've kind of been operating with one hand behind their back. They've been limited on their capacity to do things that the rest of the scientists in the U.S. have been able to do because they have access to their organism. And I, happy to answer any follow-up question you might have with that.
You got a,
No, I'm good.
okay.
So it's not just cattle that the cartels are involved in for money laundering. They've wrecked our vegetable production. Tomatoes, we almost have no tomato growers left. That's why most recently the Trump administration ended the tomato agreement with Mexico, so it'd give our farmers a chance to get back in the game. I agree with you that the human threat of bringing in the screwworm is probably more likely than an animal crossing, because we know that those animals, once we do open the border, they're quarantined for a number of days, they're inspected by veterinarians, and then they're dipped. So possibility of getting the cattle or livestock across is just about zero. But what does concern me is the human end of it. We don't dip humans, right? For good reason, I guess. So no one's currently doing this, but as soon as I get those traps approved with the TDA swarm lure down in Panama approved, and we know that they're working, my agency plans to deploy those around cruise ship terminals for hitchhiking flies and things like that. And we might even do it around the freight terminals if we find freight that's coming in from Central America or south of southern part of Mexico. So, yeah, I think you could I don't know what the numbers are, if it's 70 or 80%, but I do know that the cartel is ready to end this because the cattle market has crashed in Mexico because of this. We get 15% of our cattle, our feeder cattle, in from Mexico. We feed a lot of them and send them back to Mexico for processing, but we buy a lot of those as stalker calves and turn them out on wheat and winter grazing. Our two largest months to get those imports come in November and December for wheat cattle. And so that's actually when we shut the border down this last time, right during our peak importation season. And we were already at low numbers of cattle, across all the United States and Texas included.
I got one more follow-up too.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there's between 500,000 and 1 million head of cattle coming across the Guatemalan and Mexico border a year. And they aren't being inspected the way they need to be by the regulatory officials there in Mexico.
Yeah.
The ones that they can get to self-report, they don't have the pen space to inspect and test these cattle the way they need to.
But how reliable are the stats?
That's, I'm hearing that kind of secondhand from a USDA employee.
Go
So
ahead.
Well, the other question, you mentioned it from, y'all have monitors from Del Rio to Brownsville. What about from Del Rio out to El Paso? You got Boquillas, you got Presidio, and other numerous areas, and there's lots of areas out there where you can come across the border real easy.
right, the USDA, they're working on looking at some GIS maps and getting with the entomologist and looking where these traps need to be placed in those areas. They're also looking at doing some surveillance in the southern borders of New Mexico, Arizona, and California as well.
And then I guess my next, Dr. Cobbin, this may be yours, but I mean, and I'm appreciative of what the federal government's done, what y'all are doing, what the state's doing now and that. But like when we start this plant down there at Moore Air Force Base or whatever, from the day we start building it to the day it's operational, how much time is that estimated?
Again, it's not really a time number I can put without knowing how they're planning to approach it and what infrastructure they need to put in place, but I would, based on facilities that we've constructed on campus that would be similar as far as the containment level, building it and then getting it certified are two different things. And the certification part, making sure that the pressure is correct and the windows seals don't pop, can sometimes, you find out the level of construction and how things were done from the architect and engineer level to the construction level. My guess is it would be optimistic that it's operational in a year. And then scaling it up and getting the personnel trained to raise the flies and get the sterilization process all done correctly. It's likely going to be more than a year. I think they will learn quite a bit in the retrofit of the Mexican plant that they're working on. Will probably help quite a bit in how they approach this. And again, I don't know how far down to a blank piece of paper they have to go on a design as well. I'm sure they're fast tracking this as quickly as they can, but without knowing who's going to be constructing it, it's really a guess at this point.
Representative, I think I can answer your question. During the press conference with the governor and Brooke Rollins, the Secretary of USDA, she got that question, and she said, our goal is to have it open and running in 2 years. I'm a little skeptical of that. I mean, I've seen how government, the speed of government works and all the red tape, so I would say probably double that, and maybe we'll have it open. It would be my best guess. Now, the traps from Laredo to El Paso, you're correct, there's none. Just so the committee knows, I have 19 full-time fly trappers. We trap everything from basically Laredo down to Brownsville, gypsy moth, fruit flies, all that kind of stuff. So I've got people in place. I explained this and we discussed it with Secretary Rollins, and she said, whatever you need, we will make sure you have. So we could easily take the people that are working for APHIS putting out fly traps. She could transfer them to go from Laredo to El Paso, and my men are already there. Wouldn't be any extra expense, really very little expense to us to just, put up extra traps along with the ones we've already got up. So I think that's doable, but I think leaving that stretch of Texas open makes us very vulnerable, and we don't get a true reading. We've got one place out there on the Big Bend State Park where we have an estimated 2,000 cattle crossing in from Mexico, grazing on Texas lands. And we're not even, and I alerted her to that, she wasn't aware of that. So we've got to keep those cattle back in Mexico. And that's one of the first things that I suggested that they do is put tick riders out there where we know the cattle are crossing, up to 2,000 head of Mexican cattle coming into the United States, grazing on parklands. And it's actually pretty much destroying that parkland, but previous administration wasn't willing to do anything about it. So I hope that clears things up for you.
I want to, Dr. Kaufman, I want you to help clarify this thing about USDA having a research center in Kerrville.
Kerrville.
I want to better understand what they're doing and versus what y'all would be doing if y'all would get this facility, this center. I think what you talked about was access to the flies or to the live flies. I assume that with this facility coming on board in South Texas, that access to live flies will be there, which means that they would then have access to live flies. What is it that is lacking there, if anything?
So part of what would be lacking is the actual amount of work that could be done, right? So an individual scientist can only run so many projects, and that's the partnerships that Representative McLaughlin had mentioned. We already do. My laboratory does cattle fever tick research in collaboration with the scientists at Kerrville, as do many of my colleagues in my department and other departments on campus. And it helps when we collaborate with them, it's to improve their ability to respond to their mission. So the USDA scientists operate on a 5-year, they call it a CRIS project. And they build these CRIS projects with goals in mind of what they're going to accomplish over a 5-year period. And they get those renewed every 5 years. And as we have expertise that can assist them, and they don't have the human power to physically do the work, then they will reach out to us and form partnerships. And so we call those cooperative agreements. And that's where they can fund people in my laboratory that I supervise to work on projects that are beneficial to them and their CRIS projects, which ultimately benefits their laboratory. And the funding comes through their laboratories. And so, they currently have individuals who are working on developing models for where the fly is going to move if it shows up and how fast it might spread and what different interventions might be done that could impact whether the fly continues to move north or is being pushed back south. They use those models for how they decide to disperse the sterile flies. And that takes quite a bit of time, people time, to develop those and to have the expertise, brain power assigned to those tasks. And that's where the universities have traditionally collaborated with these USDA folks to extend what their mission is, as well as us bringing fresh ideas to them in order to things that might fit under their bigger umbrella. And so, science works best when we give people an open book and say, if you had the money, what could you do? Or what could you do with this amount of funding? All right, because we have to hire staff and buy supplies and all of those things that go with that. And then having partners with, say, ARS who can have access to the flies or to resources. The federal government has a great many resources for their scientists that even a university as powerful as Texas A&M doesn't have. We can leverage a lot of their resources by working with those scientists. And the folks at Kerrville are top notch. Some of the best minds in science. And you're right, having the fly being produced down in Edinburgh will greatly enhance their ability. And my researchers can put ideas in their head that they can turn around and say that's likely to work, or that's crazy. That will never work. Why would we spend time and resources doing that? Because a lot of their people, when they rotate down to Panama, they get that practical experience of working with this fly in the field to understand what might or might not work.
Let the record reflect that Representative Money is present.
Thank you.
Representative Hopper.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of clarification before we move on. I think I misspoke a while ago. I think I referenced Big Bend State Park. It's actually federal land where all those cattle are coming across. It's not state land. But having said that, it's just not screwworms that we have to worry about. It's a whole host of other things. Not many fever ticks out there, but we could get fever ticks coming through there, but we certainly get tuberculosis, brucellosis, all these other animal diseases that we have eliminated from Texas and the United States, where Mexico has not. Occasionally, we'll get TB cases from flies that come across. We had to eliminate the dairy industry in Hudspeth County out in El Paso because of the flies coming over kept infecting our dairy herd. So you can't even dairy out there anymore because of that. And that's not that far from the Big Bend area. So I just wanted to clarify that because I'd misspoke. Named the wrong park.
Would it be real easy to smuggle cattle across that border out there and ship them wherever they want?
Yeah, Commissioner Miller, you, I think you're probably accurate in saying it probably about 4 years, whatever double is of what they say, and probably 3 times as much as it took to make it 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But with that said, I'm kind of curious about the overlap of, I don't know who the right person to ask this question to is, but, you know, the overlap, while, you know, it's moving towards Texas, it's going to get here, and then there's going to be a period of time where we're basically dealing with it, and then eventually the facility comes online. And when we had this hearing a few weeks ago, there was a great young lady that testified about, you know, sale barns basically being shut down in the case that they find that there is a cow that's come through that is infected with the screwworm. And she had great concerns about the effect this would have across Texas to our beef industry. I mean, it would have, you know, very negative consequences, I would think, to the pricing of you know, the availability of beef. Everybody likes a good steak, so I'm kind of curious, you know, are there any, have there been any discussions with Secretary Rollins about relief on some of these regulations? I think she mentioned that these are coming from the feds. Is that right, or is those state regulations?
Yeah, most of the regulation will be federal regulations, but I would caution the committee about repeating rumors because it causes great fluctuations in the cattle market in the price. Just saying that I've heard that you know they're close as 125 miles. The market may have just crashed 5 minutes after that statement was made. You know, it crashed the other day before the announcement because the rumor was that we were going to open the border to imports, and then the market just crashed when that rumor got out. And then there was a rumor earlier this week that an immigrant child had contracted a screwworm infestation in New York. Well, the market crashed again. Of course, it was proven not true in all those cases, and the market works its way back up. But just a note of caution, it's very volatile right now. This subject, how it affects the markets.
Yeah, there are. We try to tell our veterinarians that call in or producer that calls in to submit or tell us that they have a suspicious wound or a wound with maggots in it to, not put
report
anything
to
out
the
on
press.
social media or anything like that because it definitely can affect the market. And, we've had pretty good success. Those samples that we send off to NVSL, we can usually get, if we send them today, we usually get results tomorrow by noon as far as confirming.
Right. But, so, did you guys have an answer to the question, though, about basically approaching the feds?
The continuity of business.
Yes.
We're working on that in the response playbook, and these animals can move out of these infested zones as long as they're inspected, treated, and identified, and they go with proper documentation.
Okay.
So that's the plan, unless they have an open wound or unless they're infested. But the other animals can be, inspected, treated, identified, and then move
So
out of
it's
those.
not, in fact, that wasn't the case. They're not going to shut down the entire system.
We're going to try to maintain continuity of business as best we can.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You bet.
Chair Kiss.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I keep hearing is we really can't expect much cooperation from Mexico. They haven't helped much now, and so whatever plans we have that would involve Mexico later on, why are we optimistic they're going to participate, either in the facility they're converting or in the bait or any of that? Because it seems like between the cartels and other inefficiencies in the Mexican government, that's partly why we're in the problem we're at right now. I don't know if any of y'all care to comment on that, but.
I can comment on that. At first, maybe the Animal Health Department might have more insight than I do, but just, my information comes from the Secretary. At first, Mexico was not very cooperative at all. Wouldn't let our planes fly, certain areas to drop the flies, wouldn't give us flight pattern permission, wouldn't approve our flight pass, all that kind of stuff. And so we didn't really shut the border down to stop the screwworm fly. We shut the border down to get Mexico's attention and use it as a, trade tool. And so that's, we've got their attention now because their market's crashed 30 to 40%. So they're ready to open that border back up. Cartel, no cartel, whatever, 40% crash is pretty tough. So according to the Secretary, I had this very discussion with her, and she says, no, Mexico will play ball now. They're ready to do whatever it takes to get this behind them. So I'm going to take her to word that they are ready and willing to cooperate. They did take the deal to convert that factory in Mexico. They're committed to that. We sent them $21 million. We'll see where they spend it. If they actually, start producing sterile flies, that would be a good sign, a good first start.
And based on the latest information you have, we expect they're going to share those flies with us. I'd heard originally that they didn't really intend to do that. And, is that
Well, we don't want them to
reasonable?
share them with us. We just want them to let us drop them in Mexico. What we have this thing bottled up in the southern quadrant of Mexico. It's a whole lot easier to go in there and knock it out there than if we let it creep up and get into Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. Then we got a real geographical challenge.
Right.
So the time to get it is now. That's why I'm such a big proponent of the bait. We can drop the bait, kill 90% of them. 100 million flies out of Panama will mop it up and clean it up. We really don't need any. I'm for the fly facility, don't get me wrong. But we could clean it up with the flies we've got if we could just get that bait approved and get it out and kill 90% of them. And the reason I'm so positive that we kill 90% of them, it's been done before. This very program was used in 76 and 77 when we had a resurgence of the screwworm fly. It was approved by USDA and used then. Dichlorobos was the chemical. You can still get products with dichlorobos. If you go buy a flea collar for your cat or dog, it probably has dichlor. If you can buy fly strips at the local hardware store or garden shop, it probably has dichlorobos in it. So it's pretty common chemical. And it's not all that detrimental. Or the certain Humane Act bureaucrat, tree hugging, they don't want any kind of chemicals. So they'd rather let the flies live and the cattle die, I guess. So anyway.
Before I forget, the fun fact of the day, Commissioner or anybody else, it's an old term, and maybe a lot of people who didn't know what screwworms were 5 months ago, maybe they don't know what a tick rider is. You want to tell us what a tick rider is?
Well, a tick rider, we didn't have the technology that we have today. So a tick rider, a ranch might have a dozen tick riders. So calving season, newborn calf with a wet navel gets screwworms. You had to be there and smear this. It was like pine tar and I don't remember what all was it. Some kind of insecticide. It's nasty stuff. We had a 55-gallon drum of it when I was a little boy, and that was part of my job is to go doctor those. So when you work cattle, you dehorn, you have to put that on them, then you have to ride every day till they heal up. You have to change your lambing season, your calving season to try to get it into winter months when the flies aren't popular. We don't have to do any of that today because we have a product, a new technology called ivermectin, Dectomax, pick one. I think it was said at the last meeting that the withdrawal period's 52 days on ivermectin, so it lasts at least 4 weeks. You can give them a shot of that, do your business, dehorn, dock your lambs, castrate, whatever. In 2 to 3 weeks, they're healed up. So that's a huge advantage. I don't think we probably have to have some tick riders, but I don't think we're gonna have to have as many, and it's not gonna be as intense because the new technology we have today, like ivermectin and other products.
Okay.
Yeah, Representative Kitzman, those tick riders actually work for the cattle fever tick eradication program there along the border. And they ride up and down the border. They're looking for stray cattle coming out of Mexico and horses. They round up probably 200 to 250 head of stray cattle a year and probably 30 or 40 stray horses that come over. So, yeah, they're instrumental in the cattle fever tick eradication program there in the permanent quarantine zone. Yes, sir.
Are they considered federal employees?
Yes, sir.
or-
They're federal
Okay.
employees.
And I hope they feed them more than cowboy beans and bacon. But-
Yes, sir.
All right. But they're actually horseback riding out looking for these
You bet.
animals. And so anybody that wants great adventure can go sign up to be a tick rider. Couple more questions, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Not trying to put anybody on the spot, but we know that, of course, TDA has been communicating with Chairman or Ms. Rollins, Secretary Rollins, and we had this big news this week. But how is the communication between the federal people and our own screwworm task force that the governor appointed? Is there good communication there?
You bet, absolutely. The folks that are actually developing the playbook are officed here in Austin. And like I said, we have a call twice a week with the USDA folks that are developing that playbook, along with the NASAHO, the National Association of State Animal Health Organization, or state animal health officials. We have a working group of 15 state veterinarians that are working with them on the response plan in the
Okay.
playbook. Yes, sir.
And let's see what else I've got here. Well, that's good news that y'all are working together. I think that's kind of traditional anyway. But in this era, we wonder, whether things are going back and forth, and not to spread gossip or anything, but do we have any idea if the president and the federal government's allocated this money, this $750 million, is there a projected date when we think they're gonna start construction on that? When do they start?
It was my
setting-
understanding they were gonna start meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers immediately. I was under the impression that they'd already sent planning folks from the USDA, engineers and architects down to the COPEG facility there in Panama to look
Okay.
at that facility. Yes, sir.
Okay, so the wheels have started to turn.
Yes, sir, you bet.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank y'all for being here, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Representative McLaughlin.
I just have one more, because we keep talking about wildlife and agriculture, cattle and that. But for some of these people that don't know, their dogs and their cats are just as susceptible to this disease as these animals are. So that, maybe with your comments to the tree huggers or whatever, their cats, their dogs are at risk too. So that's all I want.
Dr. Dinges, I just want to kind of reiterate, I think we talked about this last time, but we're assuming this is coming and it's coming soon. Are we ready?
You bet.
What is the plan?
We've got a plan in place, and we will try to, our initial opportunity to assess the infestation is gonna be our best opportunity to stop this movement of the screwworm and contain it. So we're gonna try to, we've talked about in our development plan with the USDA having an infested zone, which encompasses about 12.2 miles. We'll square that up and then stop movement there. We've talked about having an initial stop movement of up to 72 hours, just to kind of get our hands around that. the initial infestation. But we are going to, ultimately probably stop movement or have control points, inspection points at the county line level, looking at livestock and animal movements coming in and out of the county. But we will have a infestation area where we will closely monitor the movements of animals and quarantine those animals and premises within that 12.2 miles initially.
So surveillance, so in terms of surveillance,
You bet.
whether we first find it or whether we find it in a herd of cattle or in somebody shoots a deer,
Right.
or shoots a hog, or in a pet, how is it that we're confident that we'll be able to know that it's here?
Well, you'll find the infested larvae, the larvae in the animal and then in the wound, obviously, and then we'll surveil with traps around that area looking for the adult fly.
So explain to me how, let's say a cow dies
Right.
on somebody's
So-
ranch,
so these-
or let's say a dog dies in somebody's backyard. How do we find out that death of that dog or of that cow was
So-
due to?
So these flies feed on a live animal, so they're a wounded animal, or they can, if mucous membranes are damaged somehow, some way, the flies are gonna land and feed on that wound and then lay eggs. And then hopefully a producer or animal, whoever owns the animal will notify us that there's a larvae in the wound. And then we would, come out and take samples of the larvae, put a hold order on that premises, make sure they don't move the animals off of that premises, and then quickly identify the larvae. But then we have to use traps in and around that area to try to see if there's an adult population of flies. We would get the history on whether that animal was recently moved to that area or if it was, resident in that area, and we could possibly have flies in the area already.
So we're depending on folks
Reporting, you bet.
reporting.
That is the
and they would
paramount.
have to report to y'all.
Either to us, if it's in the wildlife, to Texas Parks and Wildlife, if it's in a human, to Department of State Health Services or their medical provider, you bet.
So, so in the case where we find something.
Yes, sir.
Based on somebody's reporting, you're creating a 12-mile
Right.
radius.
You bet. They
And-
call that an infested zone, and then we would create another 12.2 mile radius circle around that would be the adjacent animal surveillance zone, where we would go in and put traps and trap for flies there. We would make sure that, people with, livestock producers, so on and so forth, any animal owners in that area know to be watching out and increase inspections on their animals.
And so explain how are people within that 12-mile zone gonna know
We-
that they have to report or that they've been
We're gonna
notified?
put signs up, we're gonna square that area off and put signs up. We will have inspectors in the area letting people know, monitoring movements of animals in and out of that area.
So you're gonna put signs up?
Yes, sir, and then we will blast, have communications on radio possibly, any, public service announcements to let people know that we have a screwworm infestation in that area. We're visiting with county judges, emergency management folks in the counties. We've got good relationships with those folks. So we are making them well aware of what we're dealing with right now. What we could potentially be dealing with. We're having those conversations now instead of if we do have an infestation.
Yeah, and so what about in the wild? Within that 12
You
mile
bet.
radius?
We're working with Texas Parks and Wildlife. Hopefully, people, if on, game cameras, if they see a deer with a suspicious wound, that they're reporting that to Parks and Wildlife. Those animals need to be dispatched, and that wound needs to be dealt with properly to make sure the larvae don't drop off and pupate in the ground.
And so, let's say that's happening, what are we gonna do about it to stop it
Just
from spreading?
You bet. We're gonna dispatch their, hopefully Parks will allow them to dispatch that animal. We'll deal with the carcass, make sure the larvae don't drop off and pupate in the ground. And then we would set up, traps in the area to trap, to see if we have adult flies there. And then obviously stop movements and control movements of animals in and out of that area.
So I'm guessing we're gonna get some flies and
With-
release them in that area.
Within 2 days, we should hopefully by December, we have the dispersal center there and Moorfield up and running. We can get those flies from Panama and have a dispersal center there. But even before that dispersal center's up and running, we should have flies to disperse within 2 days, is what the USDA tells me.
And so this approval from FDA today, does that allow y'all to deploy something else as well?
No, hopefully they will, be allowed to, there are some macrocyclic lactones that can be used in these animals. Hopefully that will afford those, they're not labeled, but with what the declaration was today, the FDA should be allowed to allow emergency authorization for those products to be used to prevent and treat animals with New World screwworms.
And so let's say y'all find something and you've got this quarantine zone and there's a ranch that wants to be proactive because they don't want it on their place.
You bet.
What do they do?
Well, I think the FDA's thinking, if we have an infestation, is to just use these macrocyclic lactones or these products as a preventative in those infested zones and possibly the adjacent surveillance areas. What they don't want, I think, is animals statewide or region-wide to be using these products to use prophylactically to prevent the screwworm infestation.
And so in the case where they want to do something on their own, it's on their dime.
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
And in the case where you find, where we create a zone and you all have to deploy different, things.
Right.
Who's paying for that?
It's my understanding that the producers are gonna have to pay for any treatment prior to movement of those animals. But we would most definitely make sure that the wound is treated and cared for properly. So we don't have, the larvae dropping off and potentially pupating in that area.
So largely, everything is, the cost is borne on the producers.
It's my understanding right now, yes, sir.
And
But I think some of that $100 million that Secretary Rollins earmarked, they talked about stockpiling therapeutics for New World screwworm. So there may be some money there for that.
So, yeah, because she did mention the $100 million,
Yes, sir.
but, we're not sure about how that's gonna work, I guess.
Not yet, no, sir.
Because I wonder if that's for, like, your department, or if it's for actual,
We haven't talked
producers
about that
and/or
yet. You bet.
individuals.
Right, no, I don't know what the specifics are of that as of yet.
Yeah. Representative McLaughlin?
And maybe you answered, I was texting, so I apologize, but, so we have an outbreak and we have death, whether they're in wildlife or they're in cattle or whatever. What do we do with those carcasses? How do we dispose of those carcasses? What's the proper way? What's gonna be the procedure?
We don't want to bury the carcass because we're afraid that the larvae may, pupate and crawl up and out of the ground there. So we need to make sure those carcasses are, the larvae are sprayed with the permethrin spray, either, clean the wound, disinfect it with soap and water, collect those larvae, make sure they don't burrow into the ground, and, dispose of, either put them in a bag and freeze them, or spray them with the permethrin and dispose of them that way. And Dr. Kaufman can probably tell you more about the proper care and treatment of those wounds, but that's our plan, is to make sure that the larvae don't drop off and pupate. Either spray them with permethrin or clean it with soap and water and gather those larvae as best you can, and then freeze them. Or, like I said, a permethrin spray would kill the larvae.
Just a quick point to answer the chairman's question earlier about who reports, how do we report those, infestations. Previously, when we had this before, I can remember as a young boy, nearly every rancher had about a dozen of these little test tubes, about half the size of a test tube. And if you found an animal that had larvae, it could be blowfly, on dead tissue, or if you suspected it was screwworm, you took those samples and you sent them in. I mean, immediately, because what that meant is that if that came back a screwworm, they would be dropping flies over your ranch, and you wanted that. So we got full 100% cooperation from the ranchers. Earlier in my testimony, I said, here's the things I need. I need to use that money for test kits. There's no test kits out there. We've got to get on that and be prepared. Whether I pay for, I've got the money to pay for them, but I won't after September 1st, it'll be gone, it'll be swept. So that's one thing. And then if we have an outbreak, my biosecurity team actually works with the Texas Animal Health Department when we set up these road stations. Not every time, but a lot of times, we invite them to come and be there with us. So if a truckload of cattle comes in, they can inspect the cattle. Do you have a health certificate? Where'd they come from? What's the destination? It might be a load of show cattle, it might be a load of goats or chickens, whatever. They really don't have any, but we are equipped with them. So if we come into an area that needs to be quarantined like that, and you want to make sure that everybody knows, I can send my biosecurity team down there at the major intersection. We'll just set up and when they see my rig, they'll know something's up. So we'd be glad to work with the Animal Health Department on the biosecurity aspect of it.
Well, I understand still, and maybe I'm missing something here. I'll use Ms. Hawkins' word. I'm trying to learn. So, again, if say like a deer, you come out in the field, you come across a dead deer, it's definitely been eaten up with a screwworm in that. What do we do? Do you move that carcass, or do you burn that carcass? What do you do?
You don't want to move the carcass. You definitely want to try to gather as many of the larvae you can and spray permethrin spray on them, and make sure they don't burrow into the ground and pupate is what we want to keep from
Sure, but
happening.
just say that deer's been dead for a week, we don't find it for a week.
I would imagine the larvae are going to be dead. They're probably not going to be much around. They've already dropped off. They're going to drop off of the dead carcass within 30 minutes, because these larvae feed on live tissue, so it needs to be addressed pretty quick after it dies.
But will they burrow in the ground right there at that
You
carcass where
bet,
it drops
yes, sir.
off?
Right.
Yeah, so the flies aren't gonna crawl very far away from that carcass, and they're gonna burrow down in as quickly as they can. Again, the temperature and humidity are gonna dictate some of that. But if you find an animal that has been dead for more than an hour, in all likelihood, the New World screwworm will have vacated that carcass already. And, that becomes important for notifying, so that they know there has been an incident and that flies could be dropped in that area, or traps could be placed to survey for adult flies that come out. Those adult flies will come out 5 to 7 days later. So
Is there anything you can do to treat that area, to maybe kill that larvae if it's bored into the ground?
there may be some pesticides that you could treat the area, but the fly is actually pretty protected from insecticides when it's in that pupal case. It's pretty impenetrable protection that they have. So you kind of have to wait till they come out. And so recognizing that you might have a situation, you would probably want to put traps in that area and then monitor that area 5 to 7 days later, so that if you do find the screwworm, you can immediately know that that's there and convey and get those sterile flies released. And going back to Dr. Dingis's comments about treatment, everything is spot on. Get those larvae out of there. You have to think of any kind of wound that you might have, right? If you have a foreign body in that wound, you need to get it out. So simply treating an animal that you see that has a screwworm infestation with something like an ivermectin or a Dectomax, if you haven't removed those larvae and it goes and kills those larvae and they haven't gotten out of the wound, now you've got a rotting biological material deep in a wound, and the animal's body is going to react very aggressively to that, and that may in fact kill that animal. So that's why it's important to get those screwworms out before just treating everything on your herd without inspecting. So inspection is still key in getting them out as quickly as you can. The pre-treatment with ivermectin would perhaps, if it's shown to be efficacious, would prevent the little ones when they first get on there. And if the eggs are laid and those first instar larvae consume the animal, pick up a toxic dose of the ivermectin, and they die, it's not likely that there's going to be enough biological material there to cause a secondary infection. And that's where the benefit of something like that might come into play, or treating newborns if that ends up being approved.
And to Commissioner Miller's comment about the canisters, they had those back in the 70s where a rancher would find an infestation of screwworms, take samples, and send that in. Those samples went to the New World Screwworm Production Facility there at Mission at Moorfield, and they would use the address or the coordinates on there, to drop the flies. Back then, at that time, we had a production facility that was producing 200 million flies a week there at Moorfield back in the 70s. So, talking to some of it, we have an inspector that worked for our agency back then. They would take chalk or lime that you would chalk a playing field, football field, baseball field, and they would put a 30-foot X on the premises where the planes flying over to distribute flies would know where to drop those flies. Obviously, today we have GPS coordinates and we can gather those. But right now we're treating this as a foreign animal disease investigation. We've got a 24-hour number that producers or animal owner can call to report a suspicious wound or maggots. We'll get those sampled and send them off to NVSL for identification. If we do get an infestation here, we do need to develop the collection canisters, if you will, and we need to have a place for those to be mailed to, where we have entomologists that will identify those larvae immediately, versus we don't want to overwhelm the National Veterinary Services Diagnostic Lab with those samples. So we're working on that as well. We need to send those samples in the face of an infestation.
And I'll just add that the AgriLife Extension is positioned. We have a researcher who has a federal grant where they've assembled these little packages and are ready to distribute as needed. And our plan is to use our extension offices that are located in every county in Texas as a distribution site for those containers, so that we can get them rapidly submitted. And the submission information is on all of our websites already, and we're making that aware through our public meetings that we host.
Representative Lopez.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. I've heard a lot of information that's pretty new to a lot of our constituents out there that are listening. And I heard biosecurity team, I heard entomologists. When it comes to the swarm lure 5-bait, what kind of employees or who can or cannot administer the bait for the screwworm flies to attract those, so that they can be attracted and they can die? So what kind of manpower do you need?
We got two things. We got the TDA swarm lures and swarm lure 5. They're similar but quite different. The TDA swarm lure is time release, so we're looking to make a bait with that, but it'll also work in a trap. That we have trained professionals that do nothing but run traps and trap flies. So they train for that, they test for that. We usually have 20. I think I'm down to 19. I think I've got one open position right now. So they would actually bait the traps, run the traps, check them. Our traps are different than what APHIS is using. Ours is a tent trap with a sticky board on the bottom. You hang the lure up like a tea bag in it. It's very easy to operate. The other one is a cylinder, and the bait is kind of in a wick, and it's kind of, you get it all over you, and it's not, I just prefer not to use that one. I think ours is much cleaner and easier to operate. So now the bait is a different deal. We don't have any bait yet. I'm a proponent of the bait. I think that's the way to get on top of this and knock it down before it gets to the United States. So that would probably have to be administered by the USDA, probably APHIS. They'd probably drop it just like they'd drop the flies. They'd take GPS coordinates. The rate is kind of astonishing. It's 2 pounds per square mile, or 2 pounds per section. So it's a very, very small amount. So you would come in, identify the locations where the cases are, come in and drop 2 pounds per square mile, wait 4 weeks till the bait is dissipated, it's gone, and then you would come in with sterile flies in that same area and mop up the last 10%. That's the way it would work. But the traps do not kill the screwworm flies. It's the bait. It's two different things.
Okay. And you mentioned it would take 2 pounds per square mile. How many do you estimate we would need across Texas?
None. I hope we don't need any in Texas. I want to stop them in Mexico. So it depends, how many square miles per county. It's pretty easy to calculate. I haven't calculated it. It'd be pretty easy to calculate what we need in Mexico. I think there's 7 states. We need to get the square miles, and it would be 2 pounds times that. We one application since this bait will last 4 weeks. That's long enough. That's the last one they put out bait every week, but they didn't have the time released. So they made 4 applications over 2 to 4 weeks is how long they left it out, depending on how bad the infestation was. But I think one application of ours lasts 4 weeks, then you come in with the flies behind it.
Wow. So we don't have any set up right now in Texas?
Say that again?
We don't have anything currently set up in Texas right now?
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
we have not had, we'll have to go out and request for proposals. I will tell you that, of course, my agency registers the pesticides, and we have about 50 fly baits that are registered. So there's no shortage of companies that can make fly bait. So we would just go out for a request for proposals, award that, and they would start manufacturing it. So we could probably be up and running in 3 months.
What about the EPA? Does it restrict the baits?
They could if we were going to use it in Texas, but they have no jurisdiction in Mexico.
Okay.
So we really don't have to worry about the EPA. But that's a good honest question. And if we were going to drop it in the United States, yeah, it'd have to get EPA approval.
Okay.
But this dichlorobos is still available in many products. So we might get an emergency use on it. We have a process to get emergency use called a Section 24 that we go through quite often when we have mosquito outbreaks or something like that we need to get on real quick. We had it during COVID. We had several products, antiseptic products that weren't labeled to clean airplanes with, for instance. So we had to get them emergency use labels so they could come in and disinfect the airplanes and things like that. So we have workarounds, I guess, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Right,
Thank you.
especially in a situation like this. You also mentioned ivermectin earlier. Is there like a cost analysis on that? Does anybody have a cost analysis, how much we would need and how much it would cost us?
It's relatively inexpensive on a per head basis. It depends on the size of the animal. Of course, it very little for sheep or goat. Doesn't take much at all. It's about 2 cc's injectable for every 200 pounds. So it's probably. I just did some mature cows yesterday with Poron. I think it cost me less than $3 a head, so it's very reasonable.
Yeah, there are macrocyclolactones available over the counter nowadays, and, you know, the FDA would have to use the emergency approval use for treatment of screwworms, but, you know, that some of, like the dormectin, I think some of the research I've seen has a 21-day protective efficacy against the New World screwworm larvae. So, and then ivermectin probably 3 to 5 day. But those drugs are available across over the counter. They're just not labeled for use in screwworms. But with the declaration today, the FDA now has the authority to grant that approval for
Okay,
use.
and so through the FDA and the approval on the declaration, is it safe for us to use this on non-target species? And does it affect our water supply?
The macrocyclolactones, I don't think have an effect on our water supply, but I mean, obviously you would inject them or pour it on the animal that you're trying to treat. So, yeah, that would be an FDA question. Obviously, I don't know that they would grant emergency use if they really thought there was going to be an issue with the environment. I know the counties that you know we use the ivermectin in our cattle fever tick eradication program. They have to look at the environmental issues with those drugs being used in the counties and what effect they may have on you know species that are protected.
Right. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chair Orr.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is for Janine. Is it Coggeshall?
Coggeshall, yes.
Thank you. After all this testimony, I wanted to touch back on something that you mentioned during your presentation, which, did I get this correct, that currently a situation like this is not something that TDM would respond to?
So it is still within sort of the umbrella of emergency management. So what I was referring to is the ability to release funds to individuals who have been impacted by an emergency. And right now, it's limited to instances for natural disasters and things like that. We don't have any special language within that statutory authority to provide that funding for animal disease emergencies. So if this were to be declared an animal disease emergency, that might be one of those gaps in legislation that could be filled to help producers recover from the effects of this. And I don't want to misstate my memory on the specific statutory code, so I might send it to the committee clerk to have him forward it to you, so you can take a look at that statute.
Okay, and then also as we talk about 24-hour hotlines and taking samples and things like that, I know AgriLife works very closely with TDM. Do you foresee a possibility that, I mean, I hope we don't get that far, but if we should, that there could be a response that's coordinated through TDM to address this if needed?
Possibly, and right now we're working really closely with the extension offices as sort of our communication partners. We're getting that information out to members of the public. So they are really great about working at the county level and working with producers and individuals within the county. So I have a feeling if this becomes a larger response, we absolutely would use our partners at TDM to help with this effort.
All right, thank you very much for that.
I just have one more, going back to, would you be in favor of supporting bringing ivermectin in, not to put it out yet, but to have it on the ground so that we could mix it with feed for wildlife and cottonseed and so forth to treat if we have an outbreak?
Yeah, there's no, I guess, data or research has been done on the ivermectins being put in feedstuffs and allowing that, that'd obviously be extra label use, and the FDA would have to grant that authority. You know, you have to monitor the consumption of those products really close, or will develop a resistance pretty quick. So we do use that ivermectin in our cattle fever tick eradication program. We feed the corn to the white-tailed deer, 6 months out of the year. And then we have ivermectin-treated tubs that we feed, but we monitor the consumption of that really close and make sure that those animals are consuming what they need to for those products to be effective. And then we monitor the ticks and monitor those animals for presence of ticks that might be developed in any kind of resistance to ivermectin.
Explain to me how you would be able to monitor consumption of this product in wild deer.
Well, we put it in the fever tick eradication zones. We put it in the feeders. It's ivermectin treated corn, and we obviously use wildlife surveys, so we kind of have an idea of what the density of the wildlife are in that area, and then we obviously know how much we're putting in the feeders on a weekly basis or every 2-week basis.
But they're all assumptions, right?
You bet, pretty much.
So you can't really, you can't really monitor how much
They're
wild
consuming,
animal
right.
consumes. You just can just
An
calculate.
approximation there, but the tubs in the cattle, we actually weigh those tubs
Of course,
on a
yeah.
regular basis and make sure that they are consuming, what the total amount of cattle that are in a certain pasture. We make sure that the consumption levels are, what they're expected to be for those.
But what would be the difference between putting out this kind of thing for fever ticks
Right,
out for wildlife
right.
versus putting it out for screwworms out for wildlife?
Right. Well, I don't know that there's been any
both
research,
cases,
and
you'd
Dr.
have a
Dr.
struggle to
Kaufman
figure out.
can,
In both cases, I would think you'd struggle to figure out what the consumption levels are out there, right?
right. I don't know that there's been any research done on these feed-through microcyclic lactones for treatment of New World screwworms. Dr. Kaufman may be able to expound on that. I don't want to put him on the spot or throw him on the bus here, but I haven't seen any data that shows that these products being placed in feed are effective against the New World screwworm.
So there's really 2 points. One is, are they effective at the levels fed, which we don't know, and only time will tell because of the inability to test them, right? Some of the work that was originally done with those products, where they create artificial wounds on the animal and then let wild screwworms lay eggs on those animals, and that sort of work would be next to impossible to do now. Right, it's very damaging to those animals, and to do that kind of research would take a lot of oversight. And the other aspect is the groups that feed deer have a pretty good idea of how much corn or milled grain a deer will eat, and so based on that, they adjust the amount of the chemical you're trying to add to the diet, so that you have a general understanding of how much that animal is going to consume, how many grams per day. If the product works, then I'm all in favor of it in doing it appropriately, and that means having some measure of control over who's allowed to do it and how it's administered and when it's decided to remove that. And that may take some sort of regulation to monitor that, because the last thing we want to do is have widespread use of these products when it's not necessary, right? When it is necessary, let's make sure that the product is available and will work, rather than.
So are you saying, because I guess I'm not fully understanding, are you saying that although we've figured out that it does work, or that it could be effective for fever ticks, we don't know if it's effective for screwworms? Is that basically what you're saying?
Essentially, yeah. So
because it seems to me like if we're using it to fight fever ticks in the wild, somebody determined that this works, right? And so, because we continue to do it, I guess the only thing that makes sense in my mind is that that there may be a question that on the effectiveness to battle screwworms.
Correct. So most of the research that's been done with the macrocyclic lactones has been injectable products, where you know a specific amount goes into the tissue of the animal. It's picked up by their blood and moved throughout their body, and it takes time for that distribution to happen. That's why it's better if you find an infested animal with maggots that you spray a permethrin product on it, because you're applying it directly where they're at and you get instant action.
No question, but we're using it in the wild to combat fever ticks, and we don't know how much each animal is taking in, right?
So I'm not a part of that program, so I don't know how they're managing the levels that are being given. They, in all likelihood, have a very good idea of how much corn is being consumed by an individual deer. They're browsers, they're not cattle that are gonna sit and overindulge on it. They're gonna take a certain amount. And I'd be very surprised if that hadn't been factored into the amount of ivermectin added to those products. And so the toxicity level to the deer has probably been taken into consideration, and recognizing that we know how much it takes to kill a fever tick, that the consumption and the absorption within the animal's GI tract that allows the ivermectin to then be spread throughout the body where the tick is going to pick it up in the blood meal, we know that level works for how it's being fed. What we don't know is whether ivermectin fed to an animal will have the same effect on screwworm at this point. And will it only be effective against the very small, new first instar screwworms, or will it kill larger ones? Perhaps a deer doesn't take any of the corn for several weeks, has an infestation that's getting along pretty well, and then finds ivermectin corn. Will that be enough to kill those or stunt those screwworms and cause them to leave the animal early or die? We just don't have that information.
I want to very briefly go back to the earlier discussion on this research facility in Kerrville. It's a USDA research facility, and I think what I took from it was that they don't have the biosecurity level that is needed to conduct the kind of research that y'all are hoping to conduct, right?
To have the non-sterilized flies in Kerrville right now would not be approved with the containment they have.
So is it reasonable to assume or believe that based on the fact that that the federal government is going to be building this new facility in South Texas, that they would change that over in Kerrville and or wherever else they're doing this? They would move it, or is that not likely?
I very much doubt they would move the Kerrville facility down to Mission. They already have the fever tick facility is located just further down the road from where they're likely to build the screwworm production facility. So they have laboratory space down there already. It's built for ticks, not for flies. And whether the federal government would invest in upgrading those facilities to allow them to do that is beyond my ability to answer.
And if they would, do they have the capacity to do the kind of research that y'all would be doing?
They have the know-how to do the research. Whether they have the number of people that would allow them to do the research they currently work on and do more would be beyond, it's a number of hours in a day aspect, but they certainly would be able to collaborate with others, including AgriLife and other researchers that they already partner with.
Representative McLaughlin.
We talk about containment, the biocontainment, and different things, but I mean, basically, all you need is a negative air pressure to do that. I mean, so nothing gets out, keeps it inside. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to retrofit a building or anything to bring it up to that kind of level 3.
It would likely be much more than that. I know right now that it has to be a shower in, shower out capacity. Windows can't open. HVAC systems have to have protections built in so the flies don't get, even can a fly go into an electric outlet and make it into the void in the wall and then find its way out?
Sure, but I mean, on the construction side, we build negative containment deals outside all the time, where you have zero deal, constantly air monitored and so forth. So I mean, it's not that hard to build that containment you're talking about. We act like it's super secret and super hard. It's not that hard.
Members, any other questions?
Just real
Yeah,
quick, I want to go
Representative
back to where we
Chair
were almost
Kinsman.
2 hours ago. Commissioner Miller gave us his wish list. I guess what I'm asking the Animal Health Commission and Dr. Kaufman, is it correct to say that we feel like that Texas should still have a role in at least research? We're very glad that the federal government's going to build the sterile fly facility and do their side. But is it correct that we feel like Texas should have something to do with more research on the screwworm flies, and that we need to have access to live flies, and that may take some state funding? Is that correct or not?
You bet. I think I would most definitely try to piggyback some research off of the sterile fly production facility that's being built. I think there's, Dr. Kaufman can speak to it, but I think there's, potential to sell flies to other countries in Central America and so on and so forth. But I think the research opportunities would be of great benefit.
I would say that Dr. Nippling was a Texan that came up with this. And this is a unique opportunity for Texas to lead the nation again. And, unfortunately, a lot of our research is driven by funding, and that's you guys' field, not mine to speak to, so.
That's why I'm asking. So, thank you.
Other questions, members? And let the record reflect that Representative Alders is present and joining us. Thank you for being here. All right, if there's no further questions, we will go on to the second panel. Appreciate y'all being here. Appreciate y'all sticking around for 2 hours. Chair now calls Alan Kane, Chris Patty, John Sewell, and Justin Jabelbus. All right, we're going to go with Alan Kane. Chair calls Alan Kane. We have you registered as Alan Kane, Wildlife Division Director, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, neutral. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to update a little bit from the last time our Big Game Program Director was here to testify in front of y'all. And really, we continue to work hand in hand with Texas Animal Health Commission, as Dr. Dinges pointed out numerous times. We have weekly calls with them to continue to make sure we're on the same page in the development of the response plan and being able to be ready to implement that plan should screwworm arrive here. Our staff continue to develop outreach materials for best management practice for hunters, landowners, deer breeders, to ensure that we've got the best information out there and available to those folks if and when the time comes that we need to distribute that information to be ready. The other update, I guess, is that, and y'all had a number of questions about this, was we've been in discussions with FDA and EPA about potential treatments for wildlife, and specifically in situations where there might be a treatment area, as Dr. Dinges pointed out, and inspections need to occur, and the ability to have some sort of therapeutic for off-label use for captive deer breeding operations, and maybe these areas that need to move out, or in situations where we have wildlife rehabilitators in these particular control areas, there may be a need to treat or as those animals potentially move through that particular area. The other parts that we've been participating in, as you heard earlier, a number of the trainings that Texas Animal Health Commission is putting on. Our staff have participated in those. We have some more planned trainings, I think, in the Lower Rio Grande Valley with some of our state park staff to be trained on screwworm identification, treatment options, things like that. And then also a number of biologists that will be sending to another training hopefully in the near future. And then obviously, as you heard Dr. Dinges point out, the governor's response team, we have a meeting planned September 4th at the Texas Parks and Wildlife headquarters. Will be hosting that with those groups to be able to work on the plan to make sure we can distribute information in a timely manner and work with the different producers out there to make sure we're ahead of the game on outreach to landowners. And one of the things, I don't know if it's been touched on last time, I think maybe Representative McLaughlin asked about it, is if you see a wounded deer out there in the pasture or something like that, we have the opportunity right now to issue an authorization for take for individual premises for animals with wounds, so we could remove those, allow us landowners to remove those. If it got to the point that it was a much larger scale, say a county-wide scale or something like that, then we're investigating what that would take with potentially respect to change in the hunting season or something that allows take outside of the normal hunting season, screwworm season, so to speak. But those are the kind of things that we're working on to be prepared for in the near future. And really, I think much of what was discussed earlier with Dr. Dinges about the response and kind of where we're at, we're just there to be in lockstep with Texas Animal Health Commission and making sure that the response plan that both agencies are moving in the same direction with what's being developed in coordination also with USDA. So, thank you.
All right, we'll go to questions at the end. Chair now calls Chris Patty. We have you registered as Chris Patty, Executive Director, Texas Deer Association, Neutral. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And for those members, so former member, I don't know if you all recognize, I guess I'm the only one that served with you on the panel here today. But welcome back. Good to see you.
Has been. Right?
Yeah.
Already. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for the opportunity to be here today. We certainly appreciate being invited, and we're equally as excited to be a part of the response team that's been mentioned already. We will certainly be at that table and be willing and able to help in any way that we can. We obviously have a shared interest in making sure that we address this issue. I think on a positive side, I think from a lot of the folks that I represent is that we're a little more uniquely positioned to be able to help in some of the ways with respect to surveillance and identifying these issues, because largely my members are dealing with captive deer, and we're already involved with other areas of disease management and are used to doing testing and treatment, and in some cases, in unfortunate cases, if we need to be quarantined because of a positive related to another disease like CWD. And so I think that our members certainly are well positioned to be able to be a part of the solution and being actively involved with the groups that are before you here today. So we're happy to do that, and certainly, obviously, willing. We have a vested interest there. We're used to dealing with those things every day. So You know, I think also when the discussion about, we know that there are times when these animals are more susceptible due to open wounds, or in our case, that could happen during fawning, or, you know, even some bucks fighting, or something like that. We're going to know that pretty quickly, because, you know, our folks, they've got eyes on these deer on a daily basis, and responding to you know, wounds and things like that that may happen already. And so again, I think we're in a little bit better position, unfortunately, than dealing with our whitetail population in the wild, where we don't have that level of surveillance really possible. And so again, we stand ready to help in any way we can. I would say, with respect to, you know, God forbid we do find ourselves in a situation where it's here and we have to start responding in some ways and creating quarantine zones and things like that, we would just hope that we could obviously do that in the most common sense way possible, and certainly in cases, and I would think people in the cattle industry and others would feel the same way, that, you know, if we can identify, treat, or manage this disease in a way, and we know that we can move animals safely, as we do in dealing with other things, then we would hope that everyone would agree that we need to allow that to happen and that commerce to continue. Again, ensuring that we're doing it safely. And so I hope we don't find ourselves in that situation, but if we do, I mean, that would be just a concern we would have, is we want to make sure, we want to do it the right way, and we want to make sure we're doing things safely. But if we were able to do that and check that box, we think that movement should still be able to happen. So we're open to any and all reasonable strategies to combat this thing, and we want to be a part of the solution. And with that, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you. We'll go to questions at the end. Chair calls Justin Drabelbus.
That's really good.
We have you registered as Justin Drabelbus, Texas Wildlife Association neutral. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Please continue.
Thank you, Chairman. For the record, Justin Drabelbus, CEO of the Texas Wildlife Association. Very much appreciate the opportunity to be here to speak with you today. TWA is a private landowner and hunter rights organization out of New Braunfels, Texas, of about 8,000 members that own or manage about 35 million acres across the state. This is an issue that is, you know, top of mind for all of our members, both in the cattle business and in the wildlife industry. We've covered a lot of ground today in the first 2 hours. Obviously, a huge issue for our food security as a state through the livestock industry, but also a huge issue for the wildlife industry. That's a multi-billion-dollar annual, economic driver for our state. So it's crucially important that we're thinking about wildlife. We've been working closely with Parks and Wildlife, Animal Health Commission, other partners, trying to make sure that we have good information to get out to our landowner members. With hunting season coming up here pretty quickly, that's crucially important that we have that so people know what to be looking for. And I think conversations like today are very helpful, hearing Dr. Dinges talk about kind of what the game plan is, how Parks and Wildlife, Animal Health Commission, and TDA are all working together. So it's a good discussion for sure. We were extremely excited to hear the announcement last week about the production facility here in South Texas. It's exactly what we need long-term for management. We've seen it work before. We know it can work again. But we have a lot of work to do between now and the time that it's actually up and running. So it's definitely going to take all of us working together. Our landowners there at TWA are eager to help with the research process, with the surveillance process, and so ready to help in whatever way we can. So just want to thank this body for the attention that you've paid to the issue. It's extremely important. Definitely want to thank the Trump administration and Secretary Rollins also for their efforts in securing that funding for the facility. I think it's really important. So thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. Chair now calls John Sewell. We have you registered as John Sewell, ranch owner, Harris Ranch, representing the Harris Ranch and yourself, neutral. Is that correct?
Correct.
Please continue.
Thank you, guys, and I want to thank Sid Miller and the governor for all that they have done for us so far. Chairman Guillen, you guys keeping the discussion open on this is wonderful. We've just got to get an answer. We've got to move forward. We know what's coming. We know we're going to get a new facility. We know we're going to get 500 million flies, hopefully, on the border at some point. But what are we going to do between then and now? Don brought up a good question about the issue of deer and what if they die on the ground and so on and so forth. I manage around 30,000 acres, some of which no one sees for 2 weeks at a time. That's very alarming to me that we're too late if we're not there within 30 minutes to get the larvae off, you know. So those things take a huge bite out of what I think I need to do to protect myself. And that is protecting my animals into the future through some method that we feel like we have a good grip on and we understand we can do. And that's feeding through a medicated feed. I do it already under the prescription of a veterinarian for anthrax. It's been 95+% successful for me. That has changed the game for us. As we are doing nothing but striving to increase our stake in whitetail deer, because I'm low fence, I'm not high fence, and I know the worth of what these deer bring to the table for our communities and for every trickle-down problem that comes with not having wildlife. We're in a point now where we're going to have to act, hopefully, on this new bill, where we can be allowed to put stuff in feed and get the feed guys who understand consumption, who understand limits of what an animal can eat, how much they can take based on fat or whatever it needs to be to manage. And with that said, these guys are responsible. They've been feeding for us for years, and we've been doing an incredible job with our whitetail population. In 1960, we had around 500,000 head. We're at 5.5 million today. And if it gets into a place where we don't have surveillance, which is very likely, it's going to be a disaster. So with that said, I'm asking today, as I've been told many times in my career, it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is permission. But today we're asking for permission because we're not going to sit around quietly and have to ask for forgiveness, but we will. And I appreciate all of you and all of the time you spent in keeping this discussion open. And the opportunity for me to be here is humbling to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess Parks and Wildlife, but we talked a little bit earlier with Animal Health Commission about, you know, one, surveillance, if we're, how confident are we that if something's out there that we'll be able to know quickly? I'm hoping you can help answer from your perspective that question, but also, you know, once it is here, not only are we confident that we'll know, but are we confident that we'll be able to treat it and stop it and out in the wild? Because you know, that's y'all's field. I feel like Animal Health Commission is speaking more about, you know, more controlled environments. And so I'm wondering what your perspective is in environments like in the wild where, you know, it's a lot harder to get to and to address than, you know, a producer's ranch where, you know, you have a lot more control. Please.
Certainly, I appreciate the question. So let's start with surveillance. Again, I think Dr. Dingens mentioned this is our staff. We'll let folks know, hey, we're available. You have a wound on an animal. You suspect screwworm, report to us. And then right now we're working with our biologist, local biologists in assigned to each county, and those folks are out there collecting samples making sure that's getting sent through the proper channels, ultimately up to NBSL. In fact, we just had last week a feral hog in North Texas with some maggots in it, and there was concern it wasn't screwworm, but that's the level of response that we're out there. So we're going to conducting. So we're still, our staff are available to respond to calls as people let us know. And then, as I think somebody mentioned earlier in the testimony, certainly landowners and hunters are going to be a big key to this success of early detection in that surveillance part, whether it's a game camera out there, preseason scouting, or during hunting season they're available. They see an animal with a wound on it. If it's available for take, if there's that opportunity that's needed, or just letting us know, hey, I've got something going on out here, and then so we can get out there and investigate and collect samples and get those sent off for testing and diagnosis to determine whether screwworm is present or not. So we're part of that surveillance process in the free-ranging wildlife populations out there. But again, I just want to reiterate, there's this partnership between the landowners and hunters and the agency. We've got to have them report. That's how we're going to cover this wide over a large geographic area to make sure we can catch the pest early. That's going to be critical, certainly. As far as second part of the question, I guess kind of treatment, how we're going about that in the free-ranging population. Certainly the sterile insect technique that's number one. That's how we're going to combat this disease, and hopefully, as Commissioner Miller talked about, we can keep it in Mexico. But should it get here, the sterile flies are going to be the key to combat this. And again, I think as talked about in earlier testimony, we're open to the idea of some sort of therapeutic treatment. If that's in feed. Or as Chris mentioned, in a captive deer breeding setting, there's a little different mechanism. But right now, as Dr. Kaufman and Dr. Dinges pointed out, there's not research out there that suggests or indicates how successful feeding treated corn or something like that could be. But we're open to that, and we're in discussions with FDA and EPA on if we're going to go that route. What might the sideboards look like? When might we feed? There's certainly concern that if you're feeding Ivomec treated corn, that there may be time periods where you're not feeding that. For example, not having treated corn out during deer season when hunters could consume that. That would certainly be a concern. We want to make sure that any hunter that's consuming venison out there is knowing that the animal they harvest and consume is not been treated with something, and so that's important. So there'd be some time frames, some windows when that would occur, if it was approved and legal through FDA, EPA, and then it's something we could consider. But I think having every tool in the toolbox is important. It's just how can we do that effectively, and being conscious of other unintended consequences. We want to make sure that if we're feeding Ivomec treated corn or whatever to wildlife, that it's not creating a more resistant pest. Certainly don't want to take something off the table for our livestock producers out there, but it's something that we need to consider and keep in front of mind and in the toolbox, so to speak. But we've got some work to do with discussions with EPA and FDA on those potential treatments out there. And then I'll just add one thing is that, again, is if the screwworm's here, part of this is the ability to remove animals with wounds or infected animals, get those off the landscape as you see those. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have the authority to provide authorization for take kind of on a premise-specific area if and when a landowner or a hunter may see an animal on their place. We have the ability to issue that authorization for take so they can remove that animal and, as Dr. Dinges pointed out, collect those larvae, freeze them, treat them with permethrin or something like that to destroy those. If it gets to be a bigger scale, we're looking at options for, lack of a better description, a screwworm season or something like that, kind of an extension of the hunting season, but specific to screwworm management. And so those are ideas that we continue to develop. in as far as a treatment to help get some of those infected animals off the landscape.
Representative McLaughlin.
One question for you, and then I want to ask you something, John, but, you know, one of the things that I have concern, they talk about the landowner going out, collecting the larvae out of the wound and so forth. No offense, but as a common person, how the hell are they gonna know if they're getting the larvae out of there or not? I mean, you know, I hadn't seen a video telling you how to process it, how to do it, or anything. I mean, that's a concern I would have, that we're gonna be able to catch this animal, get the larvae out of there to keep it from spreading or whatever. And, you know, I still have heard, even though they say it drops off, what do we do with that carcass?
Yeah, again, I think with respect to the carcass, if an animal dies, it's out there in the pasture and we suspect it to have screwworm, obviously if the landowner, hunter, whoever it is, if they can collect those larvae, put them in a whatever jar, put in isopropyl alcohol or something like that, or permethrin, something where they can contain them and then freeze them, treat them like that. That's the best thing that they could do in those situations. And then, what was your other follow-up question?
Well, it's gonna be for John on his
Okay.
ranch and that, but, you know, and I'm gonna go back to immigration, John, because you were one of the first ones, and I was one of the first ones that screamed about the problem we were having in South Texas.
Yes, sir.
Everybody just ignored it, it wasn't that big a deal and so forth. I'm afraid we're gonna run into the same deal, and I appreciate what the federal government's doing now, but the government moves too slow for what we're gonna be facing. And I think that we're gonna have to be the forefront again as Texas to come up and do what we need to do. And like you said, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission sometimes. But, I mean, this is something to me that we need to expedite immediately, the treatment of these feeds and so forth, to get that done. But, I mean, I think if you go back to when I grew up in Uvalde and fighting the screwworm and different things, you'd go out on a ranch that might have 4,000 acres, you might not see 10 deer because they were just decimated. And, you know, two things that we're not looking at, we're talking about the value of what those deer are, but what does that do to our property values also? It just totally, I mean, a ranch is worth 10,000 acre because it's got all these exotics and beautiful wildlife on it. Ain't worth 10,000 acre if it's got nothing on it but some pretty oak trees and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah. I say that every day. What's a high fence ranch with nothing on it?
Yeah.
And furthermore, what's my place worth with nothing on it? And it's not so much about worth, it's a trickle-down effect that it's gonna affect our communities. It's gonna affect our property taxes. It's gonna affect everything that's negative to the whole situation that we're dealing with daily, trying to survive and be in the ranching world, because it's a wonderful life.
Yeah.
And Texas is a wonderful place to be in the ranching and hunting world. You know, we got guys like Alan and Justin who are making it every day better for us all. And they're looking out for our best interest.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I probably should have asked the previous panel, but I'll ask you all. What do you all interpret today's announcement from the FDA to mean? Does it mean that individuals like yourself are going to be able to use something in your operation that you weren't able to use before? Or is it that it's allowing states and agencies like the Texas Animal Health Commission of Parks and Wildlife to deploy things that they weren't able to deploy before?
Well, I mean, I would touch on that just to say this. The responsible part is letting people that are in the feed business who understand it produce the feeds that we can use. I think the biggest scare for me is letting people go with no science behind it. If we have no science behind it, it could be detrimental. It could get Western out there, because somebody's gonna be doing one thing, somebody's gonna be doing another. We got these feed guys who already know how to do this stuff, and they're working with scientists who are in the feed companies. That's the direction we feel, at least myself, and I think I speak for a lot of ranchers, that we need to go. We don't need to be doing this on our own.
Well, perhaps it'll be a good question for the next panel. We've got some of those guys up next. Members, any other questions? Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Chair calls the next panel. Chair calls Robert Braden, Charles Eckel, Trent Hightower, we have you registered as Trent Hightower, General Counsel, Texas Veterinary Medical Association, neutral. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Please proceed.
All right. My name is Trent Hightower. I'm with the Texas Veterinary Medical Association. We're a statewide trade association that represents the interest of 13,000 veterinarians and support staff across Texas. Thank you all for your leadership on this issue and for inviting us to speak to you today. Just to kind of give you an update on what veterinarians have been doing to kind of get ready for this. One thing they're doing is educating themselves. This is a thing that they haven't seen before. Both vet colleges or veterinary colleges in Texas have recently had CE programs that were well attended for veterinarians to come take a look, to learn about New World Screwworm. Animal Health Commission is also putting on CEs like this, and they're being well attended by veterinarians of all types. You heard earlier that this is not just a large animal or food animal pest. Dogs and cats are susceptible as well. So veterinarians of all stripes are educating themselves to know what to look for when they see it. You asked the question earlier, how will we know when it's here? Veterinarians are going to be some of the first people to see it because people are going to bring their animal to them. So they're learning about it, getting to know about it. We are kind of trying to be a center of information for veterinarians as information comes out from the Animal Health Commission and from the USDA and various sources, being sure our members know here's what's going on, here's the latest. Overall, veterinarians stand ready to assist on any way they can help. We've heard about a lot of different tools today. Veterinarians with support, looking into all of them, seeing which ones are effective and working with those tools. One other thing to note, veterinarians are obligated under law to report certain invasive pests and diseases and conditions when they see them. So that is an avenue for reporting this information to the proper authorities whenever they see it. With that, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Just veterinarians, we want to help any way we can, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you for taking the time to hear from us.
All right, we'll go to questions at the end. Chair calls Charles Eckel. We have you registered as Charles Eckel, partner at Lissy & Eckel, Inc., neutral. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Please continue.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Charles Eckel, and I represent Lissy & Eckel Feeds, a family-owned company that has proudly served ranchers and producers across Texas for nearly 80 years. Since 1945, our mission has been to support agriculture with integrity, fairness, and innovation. Today, that mission brings me here to discuss a critical threat, as we all know, and the tools that we need to defend them. New World Screwworm is not a distant concern. It is a real and devastating parasite. Its larvae feed on living flesh, causing suffering, economic losses, and even death in livestock and wildlife. We have seen what happens when the pest resurfaces, much recently during the 2016 and 2017 outbreak in the Florida Keys. Left unchecked, a screwworm infestation can spread rapidly, devastating herds, wildlife, and ranching families who depend on them. Texas, with its vast populations of cattle, deer, sheep, goats, and exotic wildlife, is particularly vulnerable. Consider the scale. There's 12 million cattle that graze our lands, more than 5 million white-tailed deer, plus mule deer, exotics, and they all occupy lands in the state. Over 1.5 million sheep and goat. Together, these populations span millions of acres, from brush country to hill country and beyond. They cannot simply be gathered up and injected. The days of every ranch having a dozen cowboys on horseback are long gone. The reality today is that many livestock and wildlife cannot be restrained or treated manually in the event of an outbreak. This is where macrocyclic lactones, specifically ivermectin and dormectin, come in. These compounds derived from soil bacterium are time-tested, safe, and effective parasite controls.
We know they work. In South Texas, ivermectin has been used successfully for more than 15 years against the fever ticks. South America, veterinarians have long relied on it to break the life cycle of screwworms. In the Florida Keys outbreak, doramectin administered through medicated feed and topical treatment proved pivotal. Infected deer, key deer treated with doramectin showed no larvae in the wounds. From the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute final report, Phase 1 of 2016, it was noted that the decline in screwworm infestations in the last 2 weeks of October and the first 2 weeks of November suggests the impact of doramectin treatments, application of sterile flies, and decline of rutting behavior is likely resulting in a decline in the screwworm infestation for the key deer population. This independent analysis confirmed that doramectin working alongside sterile flies and natural herd behavior was a key driver in suppressing the outbreak. I can also share an account from when I called the Florida Fish and Wildlife. I was put through to a research veterinarian who worked on the screwworm response in the Florida Keys, and I asked him if doramectin worked. His statement was, "We were all very skeptical of the approach until we began treating gaping wounds on deer, and there were no larvae found in the wound, even as screwworm flies were landing on the animal while we were doctoring it." That deer was marked with natural hair dye so it could be identified after treatment, had been hand-dosed with doramectin by a local citizen under the guidance of Florida Fish and Wildlife. That real-world success, science confirmed by observation, quickly turned skepticism into confidence. Within just a few months, the outbreak was eliminated. Science, speed, and the right tools made that possible. The lesson from Florida is clear. When macrocyclic lactones are paired with sterile fly technique, they strengthen and accelerate eradication efforts. They don't replace it. They make sterile insect technique more effective. So here's our challenge. Here's our state challenge. What worked on the island must now scale to the Texas rangelands. The opportunity is there. In South Texas alone, a little over 500,000 white-tailed deer roam that part of South Texas. Over 70% of those deer are consuming supplemental feed of some type. Behind a high fence, that number goes well over 90%. Over 500,000 cattle graze pastures in South Texas, and nearly all of them, except for the wild ones, are trained to come to a feed truck. That means we already have the infrastructure to deliver medicated feeds directly to target hosts without capture, without restraint, and without disrupting ranch operations. No other method can reach this. The most practical frontline tool is feed-through ivermectin. Studies confirm that orally administered ivermectin is bioavailable in ruminants, reaches therapeutic plasma levels, and kills screwworm larvae. A stable dry premix already exists and can be put into pellets, cubes, wildlife rations, whole cottonseed, whatever it may be, though it is not yet allowed in the United States for approved use. From a regulatory standpoint, ivermectin is not a new or experimental drug. It is already approved and required under the USDA Seneca protocols for imported livestock from screwworm endemic countries with the standard withdrawal of 35 days. And now, as of today, the Secretary of Health and Human Services declared their emergency under the FDA, the Drug Cosmetic Act, enabling the FDA to authorize emergency use of animal drugs to treat or prevent New World screwworms. This declaration adds New World screwworms to the label for injectable ivermectin and injectable doramectin, but it does not give approval for an oral feed-through route of administration. Ivermectin is familiar, safe, widely used. What we need is to align this new federal authority with practical readiness in Texas, approval for feed-through delivery that meets the realities of today's livestock and wildlife management. At the same time, sterile fly production must remain the backbone of eradication. But the current capacity is not enough. Meeting notes across the state have repeated the same phrase that we need more flies, we need more flies. The truth is we're short by hundreds of millions sterile flies on a weekly basis. Producers are growing anxious, and if another outbreak occurs, the sterile fly supply alone cannot keep pace, and the speed of building new production facilities will be too slow. This is why feed-through ivermectin matters. It bridges the gap, it buys time, and it reduces wild fly populations so that the sterile insect technique can do its job effectively. While this committee cannot directly authorize drug approvals, you can urge the USDA and FDA to move quickly in exercising the authority granted under the HHS emergency declaration to also gain an FDA-approved route of administration for oral ivermectin. Time is critical. If screwworms reemerge on our soil, every day of delay increases the unnecessary risk and death loss to our livestock, our wildlife, and our ranching operations. With the FDA's emergency authority now active, the door is open for an oral administration. We still need the approval to import that dry mix into the United States, to validate its quality, how stable is it, to run feed mill trials to ensure safety, and be ready for targeted deployment when needed. We're not asking for mass use tomorrow or today. We're asking to prepare now before the emergency comes. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, history has shown that macrocyclic lactones work. Science has shown that feed through ivermectin is effective. And now the federal government has formally recognized the urgency by declaring emergency and authorizing the injectable version against New World screwworms. This is about readiness. It's about giving Texas producers the tools they need to protect their herds and our wildlife. And it's about ensuring that if the screwworm returns, we are not caught off guard. We urge you to support these efforts that will accelerate the approval of feed through ivermectin under this emergency authority and continue to push for more sterile fly production. Together, these two strategies will protect Texas agriculture, safeguard our wildlife, and preserve the livelihoods of thousands of ranching operations. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Chair calls Robert Braden. We have you registered as Robert Braden, President and CEO of the Texas Grain and Feed Association, neutral. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm the CEO of the Texas Grain and Feed Association. I always like to reiterate that we're the oldest trade association in the state of Texas. Today, I think I want to reiterate that that means we've been feeding animals for a long time in the Lone Star State. Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for the opportunity and the invitation to speak here today. I want to applaud Commissioner Miller's efforts with bait and other things he's doing along with our other agencies in the state of Texas. I first want to go back to what we've heard today several times. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has created this emergency use for the FDA as a pathway. You asked, what does that mean? I don't know if I can answer questions in my sentiments, but that means that we're taking one step further to adding a layer in the toolbox that I think we're pretty darn good at doing. So hopefully we'll continue down that path and add these layers that we need. Regardless which susceptible animal you're talking about, sheep, goat, horse, cow, chicken, by and large, they all have one very common thread they share. They're all fed at one time or another. The Texas Grain and Feed Association feed manufacturers are not just grinding hay out behind the barn. Each one of us is very competent and a specialist in our fields. We have parasitologists on staff. We have nutritionists on staff. They've made livelihood, they've made lives and careers out of making sure they understand what goes into the animal, what dose the animal needs, and how it works from start to finish to end up with an improved health of the animal, improved immune systems, and so on and so forth. Along with these efforts of monitoring, et cetera, we find that as insufficient as an answer of an attack plan or a response plan. Our members stand ready to participate in screwworm response in a direction that would entail adding ivermectin or like medications to feed with a goal of creating a layer of protection for our livestock, wildlife, and companion animals. I want to be very clear that we don't want approval to put ivermectin in feed today to put it on the shelves today. That's not what we're asking, and that's not what we want. We simply want to establish authorizations in place and get the work done to establish the proper dosages, the durations to achieve therapeutic levels, so that in the event that a screwworm incursion happens in Texas, that we're prepared to mobilize instantly in a coordinated effort with USDA, FDA, the Texas Department of Agriculture, and other state agencies with the appropriate and effective response. I also want to be very clear, as I've been cautioned, and censored at times when discussing the topic of oral ivermectin, we understand that the ultimate eradication tool is the sterile flies. We don't want to take away the spotlight from that solution by any means, but by the calculations that we've heard today and numerous times, we need 400 to 500 flies a week, and we have around 100. We're excited to share with Secretary Rollins' exciting announcement of the new sterile fly production facility in Texas when that eventually comes online. The gap in that time frame is where we're going to need additional layers of protection. That is where the proposal of the ivermectin in feed comes into valuable play. Our ask is I'll echo his comments that y'all cannot give us approval to use these, but you can create a letter to the Food and Drug Administration requesting expedited emergency use authorizations for ivermectin, dormectin to be allowed in feed as a proven, scalable prevention tool against the New World screwworm. Thank you for your time today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can.
All right, so I guess what I got from that is that the announcement today from the FDA means more things can be used, but not necessarily that y'all can do what y'all want to do.
I had a conference call this morning with top officials at the FDA, and the idea is that gives them access and an avenue to approving those drugs in that way. They're patiently wanting to work on and create the data and the dosage recommendations and ready to work with experts in the field and their experts to create that avenue of understanding to where we can look at doing those things. You know, this isn't going to be a widespread response, meaning, you know, as soon as the screwworm, if the screwworm crosses over our southern border into Texas, in Edinburgh, we're not going to allow, you know, the FDA has no intention of allowing you to put ivermectin in feed in Amarillo. The idea is a timed response, a localized response, a very precision attack on the things we see. So that's how we would deploy that type of atmosphere using our feed manufacturers in our network. We have in our network of membership, we have one of the manufacturers that's currently using ivermectin in deer feed today. He's out of Hondo, up the street from Uvalde, and that's where they're shipping the corn down to the valley for the fever tick. So we have the members in our membership that are, and the specialists that are doing this today. We want to build on that.
So, so there's, the only way you can do what you want to do is to get further approval from FDA.
Further approval for special use, off-label use, additional label use, yes, sir.
Well,
And if I may, so this is not necessarily something we want to do. I mean, this is not the task that we had at hand whenever we started back in May on this project. It is just the only option that is out there that is currently, that we can make rapidly available for the wildlife and the livestock of Texas. It is not something that we want. It is not something that we look to grow business off of. But it is something that at this point in time, with the deficit of the sterile insect technique that we have, it's the only real tangible, scalable option for producers in Texas, to answer your question.
So you heard the little exchange I had with the first panel about how we use laced corn to combat fever ticks in the wild. And I think I guess we had a discussion about how we're not sure how this would work for fever ticks. And in that exchange, we figured out, I guess I understood that the question was whether the effectiveness or what the effectiveness would be to treat or prevent the infestation of screwworms through this method that we already use to combat fever ticks. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is, and what I guess what I got from that previous panel was that it's not a question, or maybe it's not a question of whether it can work in the wild. It's a question of whether it works on screwworms. I think that's what I understood. Can y'all comment?
So what I have here is about half of the research that we've compiled. So what I could carry in my bag to bring it here. There is research that shows the bioavailability of ivermectin going into a ruminant. We see that we lose, based on research, that we lose about 74% of the ivermectin that goes into a rumen. So knowing that you lose that amount, well, then it's easy to offset that. So that the gold standard is an injectable dose. It's what they've used in all the former research trials. So by knowing that that worked in different settings, knowing that we lose an X percent going through the rumen, you can offset that within the dose. The dose is really what is it going to take to get into the serum and into the tissue, which tissue is vascularized. So what is the dose that will get you into that level? What is the outcome within the blood serum? And we're doing those doing those tests now. You find it in the parts per billion. So you take the blood serum based on X dose, compare that to the gold standard of an injectable dose, and now you're seeing what's in the serum, and then we follow that up with the tissue sample. So through the dose work that we're doing, we're able to get further down that line. The research speaks for itself. Y'all have a handout that I sent in yesterday. I don't know if y'all might have it, but there is one case, or there is one study out of Argentina that is being kind of highly.
It's in their Dropbox, by the way.
Okay, it's being pushed around saying it doesn't work. They actually gave 3x the dose at the time of castration. What everyone has talked about today, and the science behind ivermectin and macrocyclic lactones, is the fact that it takes an accumulation within the tissue. There's a point in time where that ivermectin is in the tissue and is able to protect that animal. It takes that knowing all of those factors, it works on screwworms, and it is a time released. It is when it is necessary, and then creating the accumulation within the body. With deer, that's easy. We know that majority of them in high fences come to feeders, and a vast majority in high fences, and a majority of them come to in low fence when offered. So knowing those factors and knowing what our degradation is going through the rumen and into the small intestine, it's easy to offset the dose, increase the dose to mimic what those blood serum, blood plasma, and then ultimately tissue levels would show.
Yeah, so at a certain point in time after using this technique with fever ticks, I think someone figured out that, you know what, we're developing fever ticks that are resistant to this product. But after that, we continued to use it, and so I assume that we figured out, you know what, we weren't using enough, we weren't putting out enough, we had to put out a greater amount, and that's how they, regained a comfort level at, this can continue to work. Is that a good, analysis of what happened?
Right. Yes, sir. So, and really it comes down to the dose again, and what is in the serum. If you picture it like a tidal wave, when you give an injection, you have this peak and then this long valley. And in the valley is where all antiparasitics get into trouble with resistance. And so that's where that becomes a regular accumulation and consumption. So with deer, whether that be every day or every other day or every 3 days, that accumulation, you're not letting it get to the half-life, which is 3 days on ivermectin, and then they take another bite, and so that consumption goes up and comes back down. So what you want to do is have your peaks and your valleys at the same level as of a peak of injectable ivermectin. And so you can do that, the mathematical models, and then the scientific trials are showing the same. To keep resistance from becoming an issue.
Right. Members, questions? Yep, Representative Chair Kitzman.
Thank you, sir. We've talked about ivermectin a lot, and of course, we have these new drugs that were authorized today, but what's the country of origin for ivermectin? And if we put a demand on the market that could possibly be anticipated, do we have enough of that, and can we get enough of it? Does anybody know that answer?
So the main two countries of origin for ivermectin are China and India. Obviously, there are concerns with China, but it really comes down to the FDA. They're given FDA clearance numbers, so they have to produce a product within a specific quality and target point. It will be a severe constraint on those manufacturers, but that's just the two that we've identified through our pathways. There's multiple more. Boehringer Ingelheim still has many manufacturers that, 1% ivermectin starts with a powder, and then it's mixed within a solution. So, it is things like that. There's many plants around the world that it still is manufactured at.
I mean, we're still feeling weakness in supply chains on everything since COVID, and that would just be a big concern. I mean, the other thing is, if we had the programs that y'all are advocating for, it's my understanding from what you've said, you would be working though through coordination with the federal government and with the state agencies to make sure that's done correctly, so we don't have the Wild West or whatever. And we try to prevent the resistant strains that would come out. Is that correct?
And that's one of the things we discussed on the FDA call this morning was, it doesn't need to be a free-for-all. Approved manufacturers, weighing, checking, looking, doing all the things to check all the boxes to make sure it's not a free-for-all.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, because I was a little afraid that at one point we were advocating that we were going to tell producers to go out and intentionally break the law and stuff like that, which would get everybody in hot water. And while there's reasons to be concerned about whether things can move fast enough, anyway, I'm glad to hear that we want to work together on those things.
And we have been working with the Office of the State Chemist throughout this entire data collection, and so we are happy to share that with them. We're happy with them to even control our inventories. They are the regulatory wing for the state. They manage, they are in charge of all feed manufacturers. And so we are happy to have them in our mill. They're there often anyways. So we're happy for them to come in and manage inventory, watch inventory, and be a part of every bit of it. Absolutely.
And so it wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary as far as your procedures on everything else and oversight and all that. You just add this to your repertoire, so to speak. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, these manufacturers are dealing with medicated feed all the time, so it's the same protocols, the same regulations, the same checks. One of the things we've been kicking around from our association standpoint of feed manufacturers, we've got members that would, if we get the pre-mix approvals to bring it in, to have on site, just preparation purposes, they would make those stocks available to other feed manufacturers in Texas at no cost, above what it costs to get it there. It's no added cost on that, and we've even had some feed manufacturing conversations that will continue this week around the idea of, as we put ivermectin in feed, it would be at no cost above the cost of the product, in addition to putting that in the feed. So that's a great way to say that we're in this for the animals, and show that in how we operate. So,
Representative McLaughlin.
So, I think you answered it, but you're not advocating to go out and start putting the feed out today. You're just saying, let's bring the ivermectin in so we're prepared and we're not playing catch up at the time.
That's correct. That's correct. You know, I'd hate to think the screwworm gets here and we start scratching our head. Well, now, we got emergency approval. Well, how do we do it? What's the dose? You know, to have those answers asked and answered going into that, pure preparation. We have no interest in seeing that on the shelves or anywhere else until there's a need for it and a very strict plan of administering those type items to the affected areas.
Well, and then second, I mean, maybe you can answer, I don't know if you said you were a doctor or not, but I know you two aren't, but we're fixing to pass a priority bill for ivermectin to be sold over the counter for human consumption. So what is the concern? I don't understand the great concern of what it is in our livestock that we wouldn't be willing to try this. It doesn't make sense to me that you would have such resistance.
Well, the concern is not necessarily, in some of our minds, there shouldn't be a concern. The reality is the FDA puts MRLs and they put codex numbers on these drugs. And so while we would love to be confident, or while we would love to not worry about it ending up in the meat, we have the greatest confidence of consumers with the meat that they're consuming. And so we want to be very open and honest with what is being given, what the dose is, what the withdrawal may be, so that there's no question, there's no concern from the consumer side. We have to protect that within our agriculture and wildlife economies. And so anything that deviates from that gives us an unintentional black eye that sometimes may not be repairable.
Okay. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Representative Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll ask some of the same questions that I asked earlier with the first panel, also on the ivermectin. Is it safe when it comes to our water if you put it in the feed? And is it safe for other animals that are not being targeted?
So the neat thing about this is the USDA did a massive environmental risk assessment based on the ivermectin dosed corn along the border. And so they did a phenomenal job going through every environmental issue that might arise. And they felt confident enough, from bald eagles to quail to different birds that fly through, that they're confident that it is not dangerous to any of those animals. There is research about water. There is research that shows that it can leach into water. But in terms of the quantity that it would take to get to those dangerous levels, the likelihood of that reaching drinking water or reaching levels to be even tested, to even be shown on a parts per billion level, very unlikely.
And I appreciate the studies that you all provided here as well. As I was reading them right now, and it shows that there was no effects on liver or kidney on the animals that were treated as well, and on the injections at least, and that there was no changes either on the ones that had the feed. So appreciate that information.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions, members? Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Okay, we're going to our last panel, and before that, I want to recognize Chair Vasut joining us today. Thank you for being here. You're welcome to come up here, sit with us.
He's gonna have a boring evening today. He doesn't have anything to do now.
Okay, the chair calls Wayne Cockrell, Charlie Leal, and Tim Nidekin. We'll start with chair calls Wayne Cockrell. We have you registered as Wayne Cockrell, Director, Chairman, Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, and yourself. Neutral, is that correct?
That is correct.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Guillen and the members of the committee. And thank you for the invitation and opportunity to speak today on the next steps in the New World Screwworm response. My name is Wayne Cockrell. I'm a cattle producer from College Station, Texas. I serve on the board of directors, and I also serve as the chair of the Cattle Health and Wellbeing Committee of TSCRA. TSCRA is a 148-year-old trade association. It's the state's oldest and largest livestock association. We represent approximately 28,000 individuals and businesses as members that contribute to the production of beef stewardship and the natural resources in Texas and the Southwest. First, we want to be sure and express our sincere gratitude to USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins, the Trump administration for last week's announcement in Austin of the $750 million in federal funding for the domestic sterile fly production facility right here in Texas. This is a landmark step toward protecting the U.S. and Texas livestock, pets, equine, wildlife, and citizens from the devastating effects of screwworm. We also appreciate the leadership of Governor Abbott, this committee, the Texas Animal Health Commission, Texas Parks and Wildlife, for elevating this issue and ensuring that Texas producers' voices are heard. While this is a critical step forward, our work is far from done. The establishment of a sterile fly facility must be swift. Time continues to be of the essence for the completion of this facility and the production of sterile flies. The facility must also be complemented by continued progress on other essential topics, such as enhanced surveillance systems to ensure early detection and prevent outbreaks, rapid response protocols that allow state, federal, and private partners to act decisively at the first signs of an incursion, and collaborative research efforts involving livestock, wildlife, and land management experts to strengthen Texas's preparedness. We encourage the state of Texas to stay closely engaged with USDA as the timelines for the facility are set and to explore opportunities where state resources can help accelerate the process. For example, state investment in research such as the electron beam and gene editing that we heard earlier today that can complement the federal efforts and ensure Texas is not only protected but positioned as a leader in addressing this threat. Texas livestock and wildlife are not only vital to our economy, but they are also deeply tied to our heritage and way of life. Protecting them from the screwworm requires both federal commitment and state-level support. By continuing to work hand in hand with USDA, ensuring that Texas Animal Health Commission, Texas Parks and Wildlife have the resources and the authority to lead on the ground, Texas can ensure the long-term success of the Sterile Fly Initiative while building the additional layers of protection to our producers and our landowners. On behalf of TSCRA, I traveled down to the COPEC facility in Pacura, Panama this past April with some other members of our Cattle Health and Wellbeing Committee. And I've also had the opportunity to visit the Kipling and Bushland ARS facility that's in Kerrville. And one of the questions might be, why did you go? Well, first of all, if we were going to advocate for building a sterile fly facility in that process, we wanted to know what it looked like, how big was it, what would it really cost, $750 million? How did that entire process work? What were the challenges down there? How did this thing get out of hand? How did it get from Panama to here in less than 3 years? All those questions were questions that we wanted to ask. We asked USDA-RS, how can we help with research? Just back to your question, what have we been doing for the last 40 years? Those were the questions that we asked. And so we were able to we've had conversations on a weekly basis with producers both down in Central America and in South America to understand what the challenges are. A, for South America that's always had this, and B, for those Central American producers that have gone, went 20 and 30 years, one generation without having to combat this, and the next thing you know, it's there. And so how did they react? What are their challenges? What happened? Was their government prepared to fight this? So all those questions have certainly led us to some of the answers to some of the questions that all of you have had today. And we certainly hope that if anything, we support the research, and we support a research facility with state funding. Is think about this. State of Texas and our grandparents, parents, built the original facility in 1962. And then that was turned over to the USDA. Well, guess what? At a certain point, they gave it away. Our U.S. taxpayers built the facility. It was in Mexico that produced 500 million flies per day. What happened in 2012? The Obama administration gave that to the Mexican government. They converted it into a military facility. And so guess what? We had no backup plan at all. And so by having a state-supported facility in conjunction with that, maybe we would have the ability to stop that abandonment of that facility in the next 15 or 20 years or so, because as we understand, this is not going to go away until it's eradicated throughout South America. It's still going to be here. And so I hope if there's any lesson that we learned, that I certainly learned from going down to Panama and visiting with those producers down there, is complacency got us where we are here today. Complacency at all levels of government, all the way from here all the way down to Panama, is that. And that lack of support and a lack of a voice from producers. So I hope that if a facility was built in conjunction to do research, but that at least that facility could be maintained long-term if it were abandoned and it were given to the state of Texas. At least we could maintain that facility so that we have it back in place, so that in another 40 years, there's not, our children or our grandchildren are not up here asking your children and grandchildren to build another facility, which is going to cost $1.5 billion at that time. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Chair calls Charlie Leal. We have you registered as Charlie Leal, State Legislative Director, Texas Farm Bureau, neutral. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Please continue.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all today. Thank you all for keeping this issue at the forefront. Chairman Guillen, Chair Kitzman, Representative Lopez, everyone on this committee, and those visiting, Chair Orr and Chair Basud as well. Thank you all so much for y'all's leadership on this issue. One of the privileges of being on the last panel is that, and a lot of what has already been said, I could echo, but I won't keep this hearing going any longer than necessary. So if there's anything that you thought was really insightful or smart, I was probably going to say the same thing. So we are grateful for USDA's action for the new facility that was announced Friday. We thank President Trump, Secretary Brooke Rollins, and her team for their sense of urgency in taking action to protect Texas livestock and wildlife. And we also thank Governor Abbott for his assistance ensuring that our voice was heard at the federal level. And while the federal commitment is significant, it does not relieve the state of its responsibilities. And I think we've heard that throughout the panels, and I think our agency partners understand that. The facility it's not a standalone solution. It will take a coordinated response from the state to prevent and manage any potential outbreak of the New World screwworm. And now more than ever, the state's response team will have a even greater responsibility in continuing to lead and coordinate those efforts across the agencies and along with us, the industry stakeholders. We urge Animal Health Commission and Texas Parks and Wildlife to continue as they have been engaging with stakeholders. We appreciate their willingness to participate in meetings and open communication with livestock and wildlife groups. That's been very, very beneficial. And these agencies also working closely with Texas A&M AgriLife to ensure science-based strategies are guiding the state's response. We're in full support of the state ensuring that these agencies are equipped with the necessary funding and staffing and operational flexibility that they will need. Responding to a threat like the New World screwworm requires staff on the ground, technical expertise, rapid mobilization, et cetera. And the agriculture community is committed to continuing to work hand in hand with our federal and state agencies and our university experts. We welcome the opportunity to be involved in the development of treatment protocols, surveillance plans, other response strategies. And again, we appreciate this committee's support and leadership on the issue, and we just want to make sure that your colleagues in the House and Senate understand that this did not end with the announcement on Friday. The state has a major role to play and continues to play and will continue to play. So thank you all, appreciate it.
Thank you. Chair calls Tim Niediken. We have you registered as Tim Niediken, Executive Director, Livestock Marketing Association of Texas Neutral. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Please proceed.
Yes, sir. Well, again, my name is Tim Niediken, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Livestock Marketing Association of Texas, and I also serve as the Chief Executive Officer of a group called the American Livestock Markets and Dealers Association. I want to thank the committee for your patience and putting in another long day in the saddle. Really appreciate y'all's attention to this issue. Again, we work at the federal and state level, and again, I would say y'all have probably been more diligent and focused on this than anyone. We certainly appreciate that. Livestock Market Association of Texas, very briefly, we represent about 130 livestock markets in the state of Texas and about another 300 plus livestock dealers in the state of Texas. And our role is very simple. The folks that are sitting here to my left, the livestock that they produce, the sheep, the goats, the cattle, the horses, our job is to ultimately monetize that and put dollars back in their members' pockets and move those animals down the road, down the supply chain. Very simply, that's what our members do. We do it through bricks and mortar facilities like the livestock markets that are in your districts, and also through dealers. We have some of the biggest livestock markets in the United States here in Texas. We have some of the biggest livestock dealers here in the state of Texas. And it's very important when we look at just Texas alone, we're looking at about $24 billion a year that our members are able to transact and convert from live animals into dollars that go back into the rural communities across the state. Again, very similar to my panel partners here, I'm not going to reiterate a lot of what's been said earlier today. I think there's been enough discourse about the sterile fly facility. We're very pleased as well. It kind of feels like someone's come in and offered to pick up a bar tab at the end of the night. Okay, we're really very thankful for the effort. We're very thankful for the work, but we've got a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions about how fast is it going to be built. We've got a lot of questions about who's going to run it. We have a lot of questions about long-term. What's that look like? You heard earlier from Dr. Kaufman, some really great ideas about, well, let's attach some research facilities to the production facility. I think there's still a lot of great ideas left to come, and we're very hopeful that USDA can be receptive and open to those ideas as they move as fast as they possibly can to get the production facility and quantities where they need to be to really benefit all of us. You'll hear an analogy talked about in regulatory animal health circles called a three-legged stool. And in New World Screwworm, we really believe that the sterile fly facility is one key part of that three-legged stool. There's two other key components that we have to have, though. We have to have the products for prevention and treatment. Again, there are not enough veterinarians, there's not enough animal health officials in the state of Texas or nationally to come in and deal with the scale that we're going to need to be able to deal with these animals if screwworm does come into the United States. In my family, we have a veterinarian that was around in the 60s. He's still sharp as a tack. And in our family ranches in West Texas, growing up, he did not have to go and call a vet. This is before he went to vet school. He did not have to call a vet to come out and treat the animals, okay? We look at this situation the same way. As much as we appreciate our veterinarians and regulatory vet medicine people, there's simply not enough. We need these products to be readily available at every Tractor Supply in the state, at every feed store in the state, at every hardware store. You need to be able to go in and pick up that product that you can go and use to treat an animal that may have screwworm. That's how they handle this in Central America and how they handle it in South America. You can go buy those products off of any website down there, okay? You can go on all of your iPads. You can sit there and order some of the products they use down there right now with your credit card and have that delivered to your place. We need the same posture here in the United States relative to those products. The bigger concern that we have is the third layer of that stool, the third leg of that stool, and that deals with the protocols for movement and quarantine of animals. And just to be very clear, we're very appreciative of the Animal Health Commission and their posture on this, but as Dr. Den just said earlier, this is a foreign animal disease, which means that it trips a trigger, which means USDA and their response template takes precedent. Representative Hopper, when he was earlier, asked about some comments that were made in July by Maddie Bexley, one of our members that was sitting right here in front of you, about what would happen. I want to be very clear. If an animal does get found near one of the markets, whether that's in your backyard in Rio Grande City, or excuse me, at Three Rivers as an example in your district, the response plan is actually dictated by the USDA. The Green Book, which is something that looks just like this, because this is the original Green Book, they just updated this. This was last updated in January of 2018. This is USDA's response plan to New World Screwworm. We've been bothering them since November to update this. They finally updated it in June. The plans that Ms. Bexley talked about last time deal with response strategies and permitted movements. These documents were updated respectively in October of 2015 and February of 2017. We've been asking USDA for months to update these documents. Today, these documents and the protocols that are in it, if there was a screwworm found this afternoon in any of your districts, these are the plans that are going to drive that. Now, we have been working with USDA to update some of these protocols and these plans. In fact, I think the first call we have with USDA to go through the state animal health draft is this Friday. But I want to be very clear, the foreign animal disease response plan that's in this is based upon a foot and mouth disease response plan. Foot and mouth disease is very different than New World Screwworm. The plans that exist today, where they come in and they drop a pin and they draw a boundary area and a control zone, that will cripple our ability to monetize the animals and the livestock that are produced by all the folks that you've heard so far today. If we cannot monetize those animals, ship them, transport them, move them, we will cripple these rural communities like we've never seen before. So our concern for USDA is that we need to get this done. We feel that there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. Fortunately, in our business, we are in a position where all the animals that we touch, last year in the state of Texas, just through our markets alone, we touched about 3 million cattle. Every one of those not only was looked at by market employees when they were dropped off and when they were shipped out, but they were also looked at by a sale ring full of people. And I promise you, they're scrutinizing those purchases. We don't sell anything through a market or a dealer that's unmerchantable. If it cannot be sold, it goes back home. And we feel that we can be a major part of the solution in terms of being able to put a lot of eyes on these animals as they go through these markets. And so even though the animals might only be in our position for 24, 48 hours, 72 hours, we feel like we can add a lot to the solutions, and that's what we're talking to USDA about. I think in terms of our preparation, I want to very respectfully rebut a comment that was made earlier today and echo a comment that Mrs. Bexley made sitting here in front of y'all a month ago. We don't feel like we're prepared. Every day at one of our markets, our average market in the state of Texas, we are dealing with roughly 100 to 150 sellers. These are people that are their members, that are livestock producers selling cows, sheep, goats, horses, whatever. And if you were to ask any of the folks that are in those lines on a Saturday, what would you do if screwworm showed up? Their answer is, I don't know. I have no idea what I do. Well, who's your vet? Well, I really don't have one. Again, we have to think about the scale of the response that we're talking about. We have to deal with systems that are really not tested at scale. And I feel like the state has a very critical role to play in this process. I feel like the comments that Mr. Leal just made in terms of this being a partnership between federal and state entities is absolutely spot on. And we're going to have to get y'all's help to make sure that we're able to do our job as associations to serve the respective members and constituents that we ultimately are responsible for serving. With that, again, I think we appreciate your time and your help. Again, please continue to focus on this issue because it's not going away anytime soon. This is going to be a 3, 4, 5-year thing. So thank you again for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, can you all give us some, I guess, detail about what you think the state needs to be doing or preparing or, doing long term?
Go ahead.
Well, I'll echo a little bit what I said earlier. In the state's response team that was set up by the governor, I think their first meeting here is in a week or so. that's going to be very important to get all the stakeholders together, all the stakeholder groups, the agencies, federal and state, and to get a plan in place and to start answering some of the questions that many of our members have, and being able to kind of feel out, what happens if A, then, B. And so I think that's where, as soon as that response team starts meeting, I think we're going to be able to start seeing what, as far as a plan, and what is needed from the legislature or the federal government in order to put that plan into place. I think that's when we'll start to see some real kind of suggestions or issues that we'll have to face in facing this issue.
I guess one thing I would say is in our written testimony, we had a couple of items in there, but the one thing I would flag very clearly is each of the state agencies that are involved in this response in some capacity, let's be very just honest. We're talking about a 3, 4, 5 year timeline to respond, and a lot of what they're going to need to do is probably outside of the scope of their appropriations for the normal state budget. And so I would think that at some point they're going to want to be looking around and saying, hey, from an appropriation standpoint, what do we need to do? Where do we need some additional resources perhaps to come back? And so I think both for this committee and appropriations and others, that's going to be a key talking point. But again, just to echo his comments as well.
I think one of our greatest concerns is the speed of construction. One of the things that was brought up earlier, the ARS lab in Kerrville got a brand new lab, and they were operating out of 1940 era Quonset huts, is what that lab has been operating out of for the last 40 years to do research. And the 4 researchers there are brilliant, some of the brilliant people in the world. One of them has to spend 3 years in Panama every 3 years, but the facilities and the ability to do research was not there at all. But that new facility was built under the supervision of the Army Corps of Engineers, and it was supposed to have taken 2 years, and now they're 3 years into it and still not moved in. And trust me, that's a minimal sized facility compared to a 300 million per week sterile fly facility. I know what a 100 million fly per week facility looks like, and it's massive. So 300 million is an undertaking. Also understand that no one mentioned the nuclear regulatory agency problem that they're going to have as far as getting the cobalt generators, that whole process of getting those built, getting those inspected, cleared. I know when we were in COPEG, at that time, they were going to have to refuel one of the rods, and that step had taken them 18 months just to refuel the rod, the step-by-step basis. That's concerning when it comes to the speed of construction things. And so whether it would be the Texas Water Commission, TCEQ, any way that Texas can help expedite that facility being built, we certainly need to encourage that all we can.
Members? Chair Kitzman?
I'm just curious, I went online and looked at COPEG on their website, but you haven't been there, and of course, Dr. Kaufman and others, but how modern is that facility? I mean, are we still stuck in the 1960s down there, or what is that facility like? And I know it's running at capacity, but how susceptible does that look like that it could suffer some difficulty without too much trouble?
The facility itself is basically the same process that was developed in the 50s and 60s. What has changed is how they feed those larvae, which is a synthetic larva now versus horse meat and things like that in the past. It was built in the 1990s, and if you ask me what my concern is also, is that facility was built to produce 25 million flies per week. That was built just as a barrier to just as those flies came across from the Darien Gap out of Columbia, then they would report a case, they send inspectors out, put a surveillance out, drop the flies, And that worked for all those years until we had all the illegal human migration through there. And then also what also happened was that part of the country became an area where stocker cattle were turned out. They cut down a lot of the forest, turned out stocker cattle, and then those cattle are sucked north. But back to your question about the facility, what's concerning is if there's one thing we also took out of it was that when you have a facility like that and they've got to produce that many flies, whether it's 100 million there or it's 300 million here, the support system for that means that they can't say, oh, the air conditioning unit went out, or the refrigeration unit went out, or we had a water problem, or this. We got to call the plumber, and the plumber's got to order a part, and no, they have every single supply thing that they need, from electrical parts to plumbing parts to 8 months worth of supply of the food that they feed those has to be on hand. They can't afford. If there's another interruption like COVID was something that impacted them greatly too. They had interruption and they couldn't get the facilities. They told us the power went off for 15 minutes, killed like 25 million flies, just because of the difference in the temperature there. And so those challenges of all those things, having the water supply, having the electrical supply, all those are concerns. They are secure facilities, both armed security, biosecurity, and nuclear regulatory security.
Thank you very much.
Representative Lopez.
I want to thank Chairman Guillen for hosting this hearing today and taking this issue very, very seriously, as well as Secretary Rollins and President Trump as well. And I wanted to ask, we briefly touched on this when it came to stopping this at the border and not letting, this problem come into Texas, but wanted to see if maybe Charlie or any of y'all might have some feedback for us as to what does the state need to do to stop it from coming into our state. Is there any suggestions that y'all might have on surveillance or checkpoints or anything that y'all might think is important along the border?
Well, first of all, and I'm going to be diplomatic on how I say this, but to stop it on our border, I think it's very important that Mexico stop it on their southern border. And if they stopped it on their southern border, we would have a much higher chance of stopping it here. And as we talked about earlier, and you asked the question about cattle movement, and I kind of relayed that, one of the things that's changed from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s when we eradicated this before is that now Sue Carney, Grupo Guzzi, which are two of Mexico's main packers, they process a lot of cattle that come from Central America north. So just for instance, here you are in their Darien region, next to Darien Gap. That's where they turn out those yearling stocker cattle, and they turn them out on grass for a year. And then, some of those cattle are used with their Panama's domestic supply. But a lot of those cattle, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, they come north. Sue Carney in Mexico's their needs for just their consumers sucks a lot of that grass-fed beef up into either those feed yards that are south of Monterrey or east of Mexico City, and then those cattle are part of their domestic supply. We didn't have that in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, even in the 90s. That's something that is every country, as the price of protein and the price of groceries increases, is looking for a cheaper supply of food for their consumers and their citizens. And so you have one thing, you have that meat and those cattle being drawn up. And that's certainly, from what we're told by the producers that are down there in that area, that's certainly something that's controlled by the cartels, that movement. If you want to cross the river and go through, so back to your question is, how do we solve that? How do we encourage Mexico to put in the same inspection and treatment protocols and and enforce those that we have on our southern border for their cattle coming into our country. And I don't have the answer to that because that's on a whole big level scale because it involves, international politics and things like that. I certainly think that it is important for both producers on the U.S. side and producers on the Mexican side, they're the cattlemen and their livestock producers, to work together, to come together to try to put pressure on both of our governments to ensure that every effort is being made to stop it. We hope we don't get it. I mean, that is our goal. But for that to happen, it's got to stop on that southern Mexican border, because I don't care even if we have 400 million flies, as long as those cattle continue to come out of Central America and they're infected, then the flies can't stop that. Even where those flies are at right now, coming right out of that isthmus where the Chiapas region is at. When you have 250 to 300 trucks a day, as I've been told by the producers down there, when you stand on the Pan America Highway there during the daytime, and you can count 250 to 300 cattle truck, 18-wheelers going north every single day that may or may not have been inspected, may or may not have been treated, that you have a continual threat of that screwworm fly, or the larva, really is what it is, that are coming north with those, and that just continues then to get it that much closer. And that is what's happened in every single country between Panama and here. It didn't get here this quick because of the fly flying, okay? It got here because it was on people, pets, or cattle or livestock, and it moved 300 miles, 250 miles, whatever that was. And when you see the real-time data of the cases that are reported, it would resemble if you've ever seen a wildfire and the wind is blowing real hard and you have the fire, but out in front of the fire, embers are hitting and you're starting new fires. That's exactly what that process looks like because of the movement. So,
Other questions, members? Chair Kisman?
It's not really a question, but I do want to take a moment while we've got these gentlemen here representing their organizations. There is a coalition, the Texas Screwworm Coalition, or Screwworm Coalition of Texas, that put together a website. I think anybody that needs to learn about the screwworm, wants to see some real pictures of it, that will make it very apparent how serious this is. You need to go see that at screwwormtx.org. Real easy to find. It's a very well done website, but it also has report suspicions. And throughout the website, there's several different opportunities that if you want information on who to call, it's there. They've made that easy, and it's everybody from the dairymen and the Poultry Federation to, of course, Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Farm Bureau and Cattle Feeders Association and others. There's about 12 of them that put that together, and thank y'all for caring enough to do that, because that's the kind of information I think the public needs. And anybody that wants to not have to eat a big meal tonight, go look at some of those pictures. I think it'll help you out. Thank you, sir.
All right, any other questions, members? Okay, well, appreciate all the witnesses that we had today, and appreciate the members for sticking with us. And if there's no further business and without objection, the House Committee on Agriculture and Livestock stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.